After high school, my life went downhill. I was the popular guy, I had lots of friends and was a 3-year varsity basketball and football player. Everyone loved me and a lot of people had high expectations for me. But after not taking school seriously and getting declined from every college that I applied to, I realized that it was time for me to start taking life seriously. After breaking the news to my parents, they kicked me out of the house. I remember my mom packing my bags for me and saying, "How can you be this stupid?" "Honey, he has a path," my dad interjected. I would always hear my dad trying to side with me. "A path? What kind of path? He's a failure," she said, crying, throwing my suitcase onto the porch. "And don't come back until you're rich or dead," she said, slamming the door. I didn't try to argue because at the end of the day it was my fault. I stared at the slammed door, gathered my thoughts, and I was on my own. A few days after I had gotten kicked out of the house, my dad got in a terrible car accident and died immediately. It was my mom's biggest regret to have me cut off from my dad days before he passed. And being broke and homeless, I found myself couch surfing with the few friends that stayed in town for college. It started to set in on me that I needed income, but more importantly, a place to sleep. I began job searching online, scouring the category of jobs with housing. I found many jobs for things such as a park ranger, a nanny, and a flight attendant, but one ad stood out like a sore thumb. It was an ad for a security guard position on a cruise ship. I clicked on it and it said, 2-week security guard position, one way from Honolulu to Sydney. What? I thought to myself. I clicked on more info and it said it was paying $5,000 plus a free flight back. It also said that nobody would be aboard except for 2 security guards and the captain. I scoffed. Yeah, right, too good to be true. I clicked apply and it took me to a page asking for my info. I typed it in and then it said to expect a call within the next couple of minutes. And sure enough, I heard my phone ring. I picked it up and a man with a deep voice started speaking to me. "Hello, is this Santiago?" Yes, I applied for the security guard position," I said nervously. "Well, yes, we had a last-minute cancel and are in desperate need of one starting tonight." "Tonight it's almost 5 p.m., I said, confused. "Yes, tonight, 11 p.m. at Redacted Port. Make sure to bring clothes to last 14 days, water and food will be provided, along with all other essentials. Any questions?" "No, 11 p.m. I'll be there," I said, hanging up. I had all the questions in the world. Why was there a security guard for a cruise ship with nobody on it? Why was the position suddenly needed and why did it start tonight? I sat with a strange feeling in my gut. I wasn't in any position to reconsider, so I started packing. After packing, I announced to my friends that I would be gone for 2 weeks as a security guard on a cruise ship and that I wouldn't be in contact. They were happy for me. I didn't include the empty cruise part because they'd probably tell me not to go, but I had already made my mind up. I decided to take a nap until it was time to go. I had a dream about me getting in a car accident and my dad saving me and dying in place for me. I woke up hyperventilating on my friend's couch. "You good?" my friend said, pausing in the doorway to the living room. "Yeah, bad dream," I said, getting out of the couch. I went to take a shower, but that image of my dad wouldn't leave my mind. Him burning alive, reaching out to me. His charred hand and searing flesh kept penetrating my mind. I packed the clothes up that I had and I said my goodbyes. I waited with butterflies in my stomach and I got in my car. I rolled into the port in my Audi and on cue, I saw the ship docking and thousands of people leaving the vessel. It stood above the ocean like a skyscraper in a cornfield. How could something so massive float in the water? I exited my car, locking it as I walked towards the ship. Yeah, there's no way there's only 2 security guards here, I thought to myself while looking at it. What was I doing here anyway? I mean, what was my job? I made my way through the crowd of people leaving and I entered the boat. I walked aboard and saw a bald man with a black suit and glasses waiting for me with a briefcase. Hello, you're Santiago, right? Yeah, I'm here for the security guard position. Yes, right this way, sir, he said, turning and walking. We went through a casino and walked up the stairs to the middle of the deck. There were two sides and both had hotels on either one, and the half that I would be staying in had a mall, a water park, and a curated man-made park. On the other side, from what I could see, it had an identical looking hotel area, arcades, casinos, amusement parks, and shopping centers. We walked between the water park and mall and into a hotel lobby. He escorted me into the elevator and pressed the top floor, floor 31. The doors closed and the elevator was moving at normal speed. However, feeling awkward in the silence, I asked a question that I already knew the answer to. Do I have any coworkers? Well, yes, there's another security guard that you will keep in contact with during your stay. There is also a captain, but I bet you probably will not see him, he said in the same deep voice as before, still professional as ever. The elevator door buzzed and we stepped out. It looked like an average carpeted hotel hallway, except that there was only one room there at the end of the hallway that said, security. We walked in and I found myself in a hotel room with a bathroom, TV, bed, fridge, closet, and a desk with cameras, an AC, and a window that covered the whole wall with a row of blinds. You have enough food and water in the fridge to last you a whole month in here, he said, setting the briefcase down on the bed. This is your $5,000, don't lose it, he said, heading for the door. Good luck, he announced, slamming the door. Good luck for what? I said, laughing to myself. What, this is a cakewalk, easiest 5K of my life. I started unpacking and putting my clothes in the closet. I sat down at my security desk and saw a bunch of papers explaining my job. It basically was telling me when, where, and how to do my patrols, and I got very familiar with it. 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., 8 p.m., and 11 p.m. Not too shabby, I read out loud. And then all of a sudden, I heard a crackling from inside my desk and a voice. I scurried to open it, and I took out the walkie-talkie. Hello, stranger. My name's Alex, and I'm your fellow security guard at the other end of the ship. If you ever need anything, just give me a call. Hey, my name's Santiago. What do you mean by the other side of the ship? Like you have one half? I asked, confused. Yes, she said, laughing robotically. I look over the amusement park, casinos, and the shopping outlet over here on my side of the ship. On your side is the water park, the mall, and the park. Oh, okay, thanks. Also, I did your 11 p.m. round for you, so get some sleep, she said, hanging up. Sick. I don't have a bad coworker, I thought to myself, looking through the drawers in the desk. The second to last drawer contained a piece of notebook paper perfectly spread out with blue pen on it titled, Rules for Surviving the Faceless Man, and it read as follows. Hello, my fellow security guard. I'm the person who took this job before you. If you're seeing this, just know that I either quit or I'm dead. I'm writing these rules for me and you, so take them as seriously as possible. These are the rules to survive the faceless man. Rule number 1. Every day for the 14 days that you'll be here, do your rounds at the same exact time every day as in the timestamps in the sheet that the staff provided you with. Exit your room at the time listed and you'll be okay. Failure to do this will make him more hostile towards you. Rule number 2. If you ever for some reason see the faceless man while doing a round check, pretend you didn't see him. Walk away subtly, and once you think that he can't see you, run back to your room and lock the door. If you're walking away or running and hear skittering behind you, surround yourself in salt and close your eyes. Clutch your Bible and pray. Rule number 3. Avoid the other side of the ship as much as possible. If Alex says that she needs help, tell her that you're busy. The only exception for this rule is rule number 4 and rule 13. Rule number 4. If you're ever doing your rounds outside and see the faceless man staring at you from the window of your room or come back to see that your room door is open, run to the other side of the ship and don't look back. I've left you a list of rules in the first stall in the boys' bathroom in the arcade. Rule number 5. If you ever hear a scratching at your door while you're in bed, don't be fooled, it's already inside your room. If this happens, you must stay calm and confidently tell it that, "You don't scare me." The door will open and close. Once you hear the footsteps dissipate, get out of bed and cover the door with salt, lock it and go back to sleep. Rule number 6. Close your blinds before you go to sleep or you'll wake up to a tapping on your window. Don't look. Run up the stairs and get on the roof. Sleep here until your next patrol. Rule number 7. If at any point you wake up in the middle of the night to a voice in your head counting down from 10, get out of bed, turn on all the lights and turn on the TV and cameras and go into your closet. I have made a makeshift lock for you for this exact reason, so lock the closet door. Once in the closet, try to be as quiet as possible, hold your breath and don't move. Rule number 8. If you're looking outside your window for any reason and see the faceless man staring at you, call Alex and tell her that there's an intruder and that you need help. Then close the blinds, lock your door and put a line of salt at the entrance to your door. However, if Alex for some reason can't come to help, run to the roof. Rule number 9. I provided a Bible in one of the drawers and you will have to keep it by the window under the moonlight. This will make the Bible visible if you're sleeping. If you wake up and blood is splattered all over the Bible, get out of there immediately. You'll hear the most horrific things chasing you. You'll see things out of the corner of your eye that you couldn't have imagined. But ignore it. Run to the emergency room in the basement and don't look out any windows no matter what during this time. Lock the door and pull all the switches on the panel. Stay in this room until the sirens stop. And no matter who or what you hear, do not open that door. Rule number 10. Don't answer a call from your phone or your walkie-talkie from 12 to 6 a.m. no matter who it is. You, however, may walkie Alex if necessary. Rule number 11. Scan your cameras once after every patrol. If you see the man looking at you through one of the cameras, turn that camera off. Make a line of salt at the entrance of your door and wait until your next patrol to leave your room. Rule number 12. If the man is ever in your vision and also in the camera, follow Rule 11 and Rule 8 at the same time. However, if Alex doesn't respond, jump from the window and land in the pool under you and follow Rule number 4. Rule number 13. This rule has only happened 4 times in my 3 years of being here, but if you ever see an unfathomably huge boat in the distance, go to the other side of the boat while following the rules in the arcade, and go to the captain's office located in the basement of the hotel. You have to tell him what you see and he'll know what to do. This will in turn end your 2 weeks on this boat early and you'll get to go home. You might figure out more rules yourself, but these are all the rules that I've stuck by for 3 years and I still haven't died. P.S. As you go further on in your 2-week stay, it'll get more and more hostile. Also, the roof is your best friend. What the hell? I thought out loud. No way this is real life right now. I have to get off of this boat. And that's when I heard the horn and suddenly we were moving. No, this can't be happening. I said, walking in circles and pulling at my hair. I looked at the clock, 11:30 p.m. Okay, maybe this isn't real, and I cut myself off. Nope, you've watched too many horror movies to know that this is how they die. You're not dreaming, I said, panicking. I closed my blinds, but I could still see a little bit through them. The moon was bright and full. Next to my bed was a desk that was almost glowing in the moon's light. I got the Bible from the door and I set it there. I reread the rules twice to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, and sure enough, I was okay. I fell asleep quite quick and nothing happened that night. I woke up to my alarm at 8:50 and got dressed and ready for my first round. I left my room at exactly 9 a.m. and I followed the map. It led me down the elevator through a mall into a park and a water park. After I got back to my room, I started getting curious, so I walked Alex. Hey, how's things going over there? Great, same old, same old. I've been working here for 5 years, you know. You've been following these rules for 5 whole years. What? What rules? Oh, nothing, just wondering about the rules about the round checks. Oh, never mind, I know what you're talking about. Yep, every day at the same time for 5 years. I never missed it. I take pride in it. Let me know if you need any help and I'll do the same. The guy before you never even showed his face. I hope you're not like him. I'll try to help, I said, blatantly lying. Well, thanks, at least you might be different, she said, ending the conversation. The rest of the day was pretty easy. I made sure to leave my room at the exact time that it told me to and did my rounds pretty regularly. This actually stayed the same for day 2 and day 3 before I thought that I saw something. On day 3 at night, I was looking through the cameras per usual after my 11 p.m. patrol when I thought that I saw something in camera 8. Camera 8 shows the entrance to the hotel and is the only lit by the light inside the hotel. However, I saw it. There was a skinny man with a black suit and black shoes and no face looking at me from the entrance to the hotel. Rule number 11. Scan your cameras once after every patrol. If you see the faceless man looking at you through one of the cameras, turn that camera off. Put salt at the edge of your door and wait until your next patrol to leave your room. Oh, hell no. I stood up and got the salt and headed to the door and poured salt all over the entrance to the door. There was around 10 big pints of salt in the fridge, so I was generous with how much I was putting, knowing that I had a lot more. I stepped away from the door and realized, ah, shit, the camera. I sprinted to the camera, but what I saw was something that I still think about to this day. Looking back at the hotel entrance, I saw myself. It looked like me as a kid, and I was smiling from ear to ear. The dim light unsettled me even further. What is that? I said, trembling. But I couldn't look away. I was in some sort of hypnosis. That was when the faceless man came back into view to the camera. He looked at the camera, and even though he had no face, I felt that he was smiling. And what happened next will haunt me to my grave. He looked at the kid, got on all fours, and lunged at him with his claws. He ripped my child version of me to shreds. I didn't even try to fight for my life. Instead, I smiled until he ripped that off my face. A tear fell down my face. Stop it, please just stop, I said in a shaky voice. This can't be real. My eyes were glued to my mangled corpse on the ground. My God, I said, looking at me. Why do I feel like it's still smiling? I said, putting my hands over my mouth. I shifted my view to the faceless man who began to jolt abruptly, his limbs snapping, bones breaking, and in only a matter of seconds, he had morphed into some creature that walked on all fours. His head turned towards the camera, almost confused, and crawled inhumanly fast into the building. I grabbed the Bible, praying that it wouldn't get me. I heard the snapping and skittering steps in my hallway as it made its way to my door. The bone snapping filled my ears, and through my sobs, I prayed that it couldn't get in. I glanced at the camera that faced my room, watching the faceless man as he tried his hardest to claw at the door and bash it in and break it down. But for some reason, I couldn't hear him hitting the door. I only heard its 4 legs constantly hitting the ground over and over again in a rhythmic pattern. I shifted my attention to the door, and suddenly the ruckus that he was causing had ceased. I looked back at the camera to my room, and he had disappeared. What the hell? I said, putting my hands to my face. I started sobbing, realizing that I would probably die here. I was crying for around 30 minutes when I heard my phone ring. I took my hands off my face and looked at my phone, and the number 911 was calling me. You can do better than that," I said out loud, laughing to the stupidity that laid on my phone. "I'm in the middle of an ocean. Why would the police be calling me?" I said, looking at the time. It was 12:46 a.m. I started getting more annoyed than scared or sad that 911 kept calling me, so I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and kept it like that for the rest of my stay. I hopped out of my chair and hopped in bed, doing my nightly routine of closing my blinds, checking the locks, and putting the Bible on the nightstand. I got tucked into bed and I couldn't sleep. Trying to get my mind off of what had happened today, I started playing games on my phone. It was around 2 a.m. when I finally decided that I would try to go to sleep, and I plugged my phone in, turned off the light, and put the covers over my shoulder. I looked into the pitch black room and started thinking about how I would survive here. "Hey, only 11 more days. You got this," I said out loud. My eyes adjusted to the darkness and now I could see everything clearly. For some reason, I felt the air change somehow, like something was telling me that someone or something was watching me. "It's just your imagination, go to sleep," I said to myself, forcing my eyes shut. But I was now wide awake. I opened my eyes to scan the room to try to tell my mind that it was okay and that I could go to sleep and wouldn't die when I saw it. Standing in the corner of my room next to the blinds was the faceless man. He was camouflaged by his black outfit and was so tall that his head hit the ceiling. He was standing still and I could feel him watching me. My mind started racing. This wasn't in the rules. I didn't come back from a patrol. I didn't hear counting in my head, and I didn't hear scratching at the door. What am I supposed to do? It would have killed me if it already wanted to. I started panicking. Pretend that you didn't see it, like in rule number 2. I looked away and slowly went on my stomach, facing my head away from the man, pretending that I didn't see him. After about an hour of me in this position, I heard footsteps at the foot of my bed. I closed my eyes shut and held my breath, pretending to be asleep. When I heard the door open and close shut, I started softly whimpering again in my bed, praying that this would be over soon. I turned on my back, double-checking to see if the man was gone, and felt relieved when I looked at the corner and he was. Well, that's a new rule, I thought to myself. I got the piece of paper and a pen and I wrote, Rule 14. If you're ever in bed and see the man in your room in the middle of the night, pretend you didn't see him and try to go to sleep. I wrote it in the last margin of the piece of notebook paper, put it on my desk, and I fell asleep. Day 4 and half of day 5 were pretty minimal. I kept thinking that I saw the man in the corner of my eye, but when I would look, he would be gone. I would also get calls at night, but I knew not to pick them up, until I saw that my dad had called me. I looked at the phone and almost passed accept before I knew it was fake. I used to call my dad every day before what happened. I would send him voicemails too, and seeing that on my phone now really crushed my heart. I gotta know what's up with this cruise ship, I told myself. I stood up from my bed and walked over to my desk and picked up my walkie-talkie and I called Alex. To my surprise, even though it was well past 12, she picked up instantly. "Hey, do you need help?" "No," I stuttered, surprised about her cheerful demeanor. "Just got a couple questions about the job." "Yeah, for sure. What do you need?" "What's the purpose of all this?" Listen here, okay? I'm only ever going to say this once and only once. The man is always watching. He's waiting for you to break the rules, so don't break them and you'll be okay. She then hung up and the room fell in an eerie silence. He's always watching me, I thought to myself. Well, at least I know that he can't get me if I follow the rules. Can he? I started panicking, thinking that the rules weren't 100% and almost missed the voice in my head counting. Rule number 7. If at any point you wake up in the middle of the night to a voice in your head counting down from 10, Get out of bed, turn on all the lights, and turn on the TV and cameras and lock your closet. 8. What? I didn't think that. 7. No. I went to turn on my cameras. 6. I turned on my cameras and got the remote and tried pressing the on button. 5. Oh, stupid piece of junk, turn on. I said, slamming the on button as I kept trying to turn it on. 4. It finally turned on. 3. I threw the remote onto the bed and slammed the closet door open and hopped inside. 2. I closed it and locked it from the inside and sat down in the corner under my clothes. 1. I closed my eyes, and as it said 1, I heard the lock on my front door turn and the man stepped inside my room. I held my breath as I heard him skittering around my room, making those bone-cracking noises everywhere that he went. I felt like I was holding my breath for an eternity before he got to the closet and just scratched at it for a second. It was like he was taunting me, knowing that I was in there. Like he could kill me at this instant but wanted to toy with me. He was scratching at the door for about 5 seconds before he scooted off into the hallway, closing the door behind him. I made sure that I couldn't hear his footsteps at all before breathing. I had almost passed out due to the lack of oxygen and started hyperventilating. As I was hyperventilating, I started crying again in my closet, wanting to stay here forever, dreading the thought of even leaving this temporary home. But I had to. I had a future after this. I would go to community college and make myself a happy life. I can't die here. After about 5 minutes of crying, I got up and opened the door. The room was exactly how I had left it, spot on, like he wasn't ever there. I looked at the closet door and realized that there weren't any scratch marks either. It was around 2 a.m. at this point, so I hopped into bed and fell asleep quickly. Nothing happened on day 6 except for the usual phone calls at 12 a.m. and the occasional whispers that I would hear while on patrol. Day 7 came around, and this was my first encounter face-to-face with the man. I was walking and doing my patrol as usual when I thought that I saw something. I was in the water park, making my way out through the exit, when I thought that I saw the man looking in my direction inside of a food truck right next to the exit. I almost looked before I realized that it was real this time and not out of the corner of my eye. I didn't make direct eye contact with it, but I felt that it knew I had noticed it. I walked past the wooden gate of the water park, and after I knew he couldn't see me, I ran to the hotel. I felt like I ran 100 miles before making it to my elevator and spamming the button. I kept spamming it until it finally opened and I hopped inside. I spammed to close before I heard the faint noise of bones cracking and skittering coming my way. I quickly surrounded myself in the salt that I carried with me in my Bible every time I did patrols, and I clutched it tightly. Luckily, it didn't get to me before the elevator closed, but it started slamming against the door. And that's when I heard it skittering up the steps and banging on the door every floor up to my floor, knowing that it would catch me if I got to my floor. I surrounded myself with salt in a little circle, and when we got to my floor, I didn't dare open my eyes. I prayed that I would be okay and sat calm in my circle of salt. I felt hopeless. I felt stupid for believing that some little salt would actually save me from the horror that beheld in front of me. I felt that presence I felt when I saw the man in my room, like something wanted to kill me so badly. It wanted to rip me to shreds and feast on me, like a lion looking at its prey, but it couldn't. I prayed to every god imaginable, and eventually the feeling went away. And that's when I heard that bone cracking walk away from me. Never until now did I realize that it was basically face to face with me, waiting for me to open my eyes. I didn't open my eyes for like 5 minutes. I squinted them open and then exhaled in relief. I was safe. I stepped out of the salt and headed back to my hotel. I got back and accidentally fell asleep due to the events that had just transpired. I woke up at 5 p.m. realizing that I skipped my patrol when I heard a small scratch at my door. For a second, I was confused, but then realized the horror that I was in. This was a rule. I pulled out the rule in my pocket and scanned it. Rule number 5. If you ever hear a scratching at your door while you're in bed, don't be fooled, it's already inside your room. If this happens, you must stay calm and peacefully tell it that, "You don't scare me." The door will open and close. Once you hear the footsteps dissipate, get out of bed and cover the door with salt, lock it, and go back to sleep. The man was inside my room, I thought. I sat up in my bed looking at the 90-degree angle of my wall, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man, when I saw the edge of a claw on the floor. I got shocked and then I said, You don't scare me." I screamed, feeling a sense of fight inside me. The scratching got louder and faster until I thought that it was scratching through my door. This went on for about 15 seconds before I heard the door open and close and skittering footsteps softly getting quieter with that god-awful sound. Quickly realizing that this happened probably due to me breaking rule number 1, I got out of bed and put salt at the edge of the door. However, this happened during the day, so how would I go back to sleep like it said to do in the rules? That didn't make any sense. I came to the conclusion that I would just go out at my next shift. It felt like an eternity before my next shift started. I had my ear to the door for like 2 hours and I could hear shuffling throughout the hotel like it was waiting impatiently for me to come out. I was looking at my phone and clenching my salt and Bible, sweating that if I left the room, it would be my demise. It turned 8 p.m. and I looked through the peephole and I didn't see anything. It looked normal, so I opened the door quietly and tiptoed through the hallway to my elevator. I got to the elevator and pressed the down button and it opened immediately. For reference, the elevator doors are glass so you can see through them. Going down the floors, I kept seeing the man look at me at the end of the hallway, getting closer and closer with each floor that passed. I did the calculations and knew that it would be at the door by the time that it got to the elevator door, so I stepped in the ring of salt that I had made earlier and squinted my eyes open, looking at the man getting closer and closer. This is impossible, I thought. The man would have to move at the speed of light. There's no way that's real, I said out loud. I came to the realization that it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I didn't dare leave that circle. At the floor right before the lobby, the man had disappeared. Not feeling safe still, I didn't leave the circle, but when I got to the hotel lobby, I felt a voice in my head say, "For every patrol you miss, it goes down a floor." I shivered and not accustomed to my thoughts not being mine, but I pondered on what it said. If it goes down a floor for every patrol that I miss, that means that I have one chance left. That piece of garbage missed almost 30 patrols. That's probably why he quit, I said angrily out loud. I stepped out and did my patrol as normal. The 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. patrols are the worst since you always think that you see the man due to the darkness that consumes the shift. Until the moon comes up, I have to use the light of the mall and my flashlight to see anything. I finished my next 2 shifts and got back to my hotel room. Usually exhausted by my 11 p.m. shift, I don't check the cameras to my fullest extent, but something told me that I would need to today. I checked each camera fully until I got to camera 14. Standing in the park was the man. However, he wasn't staring at the camera, he was looking towards the hotel. Crap, I said out loud, scared to look out the window. There's something about this in the rules, right? I pulled out the rules and there was. Rule number 12. If the man is ever in your vision and also in the camera, follow Rule 11 and Rule 8 at the same time. However, if Alex doesn't respond, jump from the window and land in the pool under you and follow Rule number 4. Learning from last time, I turned the camera off and quickly walkied Alex while getting my salt.
Yes?
Alex said groggily. There's an intruder, I exclaimed, excited that Alex had picked up.
On my way,
Alex said with more energy and hastily. I thought that I had forgotten to do something when I realized that I forgot to close the blinds. I got to the blinds and started closing them when I thought that I saw my dad looking at me where the man was supposed to be. He looked at me frowning, crying tears of blood and missing his eyes. I started getting teary-eyed looking at it, but I closed the blinds and I hopped in bed. While trying to sleep, I heard commotion outside, but I knew not to look. It was in a language that I didn't know, but it was spoken like they had razor blades in their throat. Thankfully, the night was peaceful. It was day 8 and I only had 6 more days to go. I told myself that I had made it this far and that it was somewhat easy so far. I did my 9 a.m. patrol as regular, thinking nothing was out of the ordinary. I was at the water park heading towards the hotel when something told me to look up towards my room. Standing there in my room was the faceless man. He was staring into my soul with those empty eyes. My heart dropped and I almost gave up. My legs felt weak and I started whimpering. I pulled the rules out from my pocket and I read them while running. Rule number 4, if you're ever doing your rounds outside and see the faceless man staring at you in the window of your room, or you come back to see that the room door is open, run to the other side of the ship and don't look back. I've left you a list of rules in the first stall in the boys' bathroom in the arcade. I ran through the water park and didn't follow my usual route, running straight through the opposite exit through a door that went into a building and into a casino-looking area. I ran through the door and I was greeted by smooth jazz. It was also hypnotizing me. It echoed through this mass expanse of what was supposed to be a casino. But instead I was met with an endless expanse of tan carpet and beige walls that rose hundreds of feet into the air. Only the weak fluorescent lights lightly illuminating the place gave any sign of a ceiling at all. However, in the middle of the casino there was a chair with a noose above it that came from the shadows. "What the crap?" I said out loud, my voice echoing. I ran through the building, admiring what I was looking at. It felt like the building didn't have an end. It felt like an eternity before I got to the other side of the casino. And that's when I heard the door that I came through crash with it falling off its hinges. Even though it was probably a quarter of a mile away from my position, I could hear it clearly and hear the skittering bone snapping behind me inching closer, echoing throughout that large space. I got to the door that seemed so far away and ran through it to find that I was now in an arcade. I entered it and there was pop music playing and all the machines were running. However, it was a lot smaller than the casino. "Bathroom, go to the bathroom like it said in the rules," I said to myself, scanning the arcade quickly. I saw the boys' bathroom and I made my way over to it. I entered and I got to the first stall. On the toilet paper dispenser, there was a folded up piece of paper that said, "Rules to survive Alex's place." I yanked the paper from the tape and unfolded it, and this is what it read. "You're most likely in a rush, so I'll keep it nice and sweet. There are only 6-ish rules. Rule number 1. Do not trust Alex. She might try to lure you or tell you that she needs help, but I promise she'll be okay. Rule number 2. If you ever hear, smell, think, see, or feel any presence that isn't you, run to the arcade. For some reason, Alex's patrol map doesn't go to the arcade, so you'll be safe here. Rule number 3, if you're doing the patrol and the roller coasters ever start and you hear screaming coming from them, run. If you don't make it out of the amusement park before the ride ends, it's too late for you. Rule number 4, never even look towards the hotels. If you look, you'll die. Rule number 5, if you're in the casino or the outlets and you hear the music change to static and you hear breathing coming from the speakers, run to your side of the ship no matter what you see or hear. This means that they are here, and that you must run to your side to press the button in the basement. When you go back through, the faceless man will be more hostile than ever before, and you must follow the rules. Rule number 6. To get out of here, other than Rule 5, you must do a full patrol for her. Her patrol has no set direction, so just go to the casino, amusement park, and outlet without stopping. After your patrol, you gotta call her and tell her that you did a patrol for her and she'll thank you. She'll know if you're lying to her. And tell her that there's an intruder on your side and she'll go to your side and take the faceless man away for 5 minutes. While she's doing this, you must sneak past them to your room. You cannot go to the other side until this, unless you want the faceless man to kill you. Rule 6.5. The arcade becomes unsafe after a couple of hours of being in it since she randomly checks it once a day. I was contemplating just giving up there after reading the rules. If I just give up and let them take me, it'll be a lot easier than fighting it. I said, whimpering. I felt a pit in my heart, like I was really about to die. I really would just be another number, a person forgotten about. I started talking to myself, trying to give me encouragement. I gave my phone screen, which had my family on it, a kiss and decided to head out and try to get this patrol over with. I stepped into the arcade into the exit door. I stepped out into a fake brick street with arrows pointing saying which place led where. I looked at my phone and it read 12 p.m. Alex was probably out on a patrol right now. I gotta hurry before she could catch up to me. I sprinted through the outlets and through the empty casino and back into the amusement park. However, when my foot went into the amusement park, it was like my body froze up. I felt something almost godlike, something that reigned over me, something that I would have to kneel to. I knew that it wasn't close to me, but maybe in eye view, but I was frozen. I wanted to run so bad, but I was stuck with my foot suspended in the air trying to take a step. Oh, hello, Santiago. I heard a voice that boomed throughout the entire ship. Why don't you come over here and let's ride some rides together? It sounds fun. You're not doing your patrol, are you? I wanted to just run, but I knew I couldn't trust it. Just off of her voice, I knew that it was pure malice and evil. The embodiment of everything bad. Run, get out of here, the voice in my head said to me. And just like that, boom, my foot planted on the floor and I used all the muscles at their fullest to run as fast as I could to that arcade. Oh, you don't want to play, what a shame. I heard a sinister voice say behind me, smiling, but I ignored it and ran even faster. I got to the arcade and fell on the ground out of exhaustion, wheezing. I walked over to the bathroom to get some tap water when nothing came out. My mouth was dry and I was sweating. I started drinking the toilet water out of desperation. I bet he hasn't thought of this before, I said, laughing in my own pity. I stood up and I threw up in the trash can. I felt like a new man. This time I would start in the amusement park and go from the outlets to the casinos. I made my way down the fake brick streets to the amusement park, looking at my phone, making sure that she wouldn't be out on patrol. It said 2 p.m. I patrolled the park and nothing happened. I felt very alone, like nothing has ever been there. It was almost like the roller coasters were rusty and hadn't been rode in years. Feeling very uncomfortable, I headed for the outlets. I went past the roller coasters and the kid rides. They were spinning teacups with faces on them. Fastly walking past them, I physically saw their eyes following me. What the hell? I took a few steps back and I noticed that a couple of them were following me. Yeah, that's my cue to go. And that's when I made a sprint for the exit, seeing the fake carnival horses staring at me too. The outlets had all the big brand stores, but it had a lot of stores that I'd never heard of before that looked out of place, like it wasn't there the previous time. Weird. I didn't remember seeing a Maylee's Surgery or the Human Diner. The thing is that their lights were on. Every other store's lights were off except for those two. Yeah, this definitely isn't in the rules, I thought to myself. I walked over and I checked them out. Sure enough, there were actual people inside. My heart dropped. In Maylee's Surgery, there was one operating table with a person on it, but it was more like a corpse now. Their organs were sprawled out everywhere on the operating table. I almost puked looking at it. Next to the corpse, however, was a red-haired nurse who had bloody gloves and tools in each hand. Looking away and towards the diner, I saw pigs sitting at booths and tables. I couldn't contain myself. I rubbed my eyes and looked to see if they were still there. Yeah, another cue for me to leave, I said to myself, not looking back and seeing a pig walk into a table with a suit, or carrying a tray with a corpse of human on it. Leaving the area, I made sure to pay attention to the lo-fi jazz, just in case it decided to change. I made my way out of there and towards the casino, but for a second, something subconsciously told me to look at the hotel. I started moving my gaze towards it, but I stopped before I realized what I was doing. Yeah, that was way too close, I said to myself, now looking in the opposite direction. It was still really bright outside, and I made my way to the casino. I entered it to find the same scene as before. There was an empty tan casino with a chair maybe 2 football fields away from me in the middle of the casino, with a noose right above it. Why do I even patrol here? Everything's already in view, I thought to myself. I went ahead anyway and decided to make one big circle around the place. The lo-fi jazz that played in the background made it a lot more relaxing to do this, but the thought of it turning off always lingered in my mind. As I headed towards the middle of the casino, relaxing to the music as I walked, curiously I went over to the chair. I inspected it, and it was just any regular old wooden chair. My legs were hurting from all that running, so I decided to take a seat. I let out an ah, finally feeling some relaxation in this place. But then I realized that something was wrong. I didn't feel relaxed anymore, something was missing, and that's when I heard breathing coming out of the speakers. Ah, shit, I said, standing up and looking for the exit. I gazed upon it, and then the lights went out for a second. What the? The light came back on, and now there were chairs and nooses everywhere, like it was copy and pasted throughout the entire casino. However, where I was just sitting, there was a corpse of me hanging from the noose. I screamed, looking at myself hanging lifelessly from it, and started running towards the exit. I heard the entrance door open, and I looked behind me. It was a pale woman. Her hair was extremely greasy and frail, and she had sockets for eyes. She looked to be in her 30s and had a gown on, but she was really fast, like inhumanly fast. I booked it, trying my hardest to avoid all the wooden chairs that blocked my path. By the time that I made it to the exit, she was around 50 feet behind me and closing in quick, and so I booked it out of there. Running through that door, my surroundings soon turned into nighttime. I looked to my right and there was another boat, not unfathomably big like it had said in the rules, but just another cruise ship, almost identical to the one that I was on, coming towards us. I've got to be dreaming, I said out loud, smacking my face. The moon was full, a blood-red tint washed over the ocean. Or maybe not, I said to myself, hearing the exit door barging behind me. I ran through the water park using a small shortcut that I had found that went behind all the concessions until I got to my hotel. Don't look around, just focus on the basement.
Yes, keep running.
I heard Alex's voice in my walkie-talkie. However, I also heard her behind me say that. Oh, come on, just give up. It'll be quick and painless, I swear. I got to the hotel lobby and had a split decision whether to go in the elevator or take the stairs when I decided that the stairs were more inviting. Running down them, I saw the door, and looking through the small box window in it, I realized the lights were off and I turned my phone light on. All of my senses were heightened all the way, and I had never felt like this before. I went down the stairs into the basement and realized that it was very quiet. I could hear my footsteps and my heavy breathing echo in the pitch-black basement. I made it to the door that said, "Emergency room, staff only." I opened it, and inside there was a desk with cameras on the back wall, and a big panel with a bunch of switches on the right wall. I quickly turned on the light, locked the door, and walked over to the panels. I pressed them all, and the sirens blared immediately. And then my body gave out. I collapsed and I was cramping all over. While on the floor, I thought about everything that had occurred, and despite the horrors, I was fairly proud of what I had accomplished. I looked at my phone. August 25th at 12:27 a.m. It read. What? Wait a minute, I said, looking at it. I had entered the ship on the 13th. Today was to be my 8th day. It was supposed to be the 21st. What is this place? I said, starting to laugh out loud. I laid down with uncontrollable laughter on the floor. I knew that I looked crazy, but I didn't care. I mean, maybe I was. My laughter was abruptly interrupted. "Oh, please let me in," Alex's voice said outside the door frantically. "Shut up. You literally just tried to kill me. Why would I let you in?" "That wasn't me, I swear. They're gonna get me if you don't let me in," she said, now banging on the door. "Sorry, but you'll have to go somewhere else because I'm not budging." "Oh, Santi, let her in, come on," I heard my father's voice say now. "That's not fair. You can't do that," I said in a shaky, crying voice. "It's me, Santi, your pops." "No, it's not. You're some hideous creature that wants to kill me." "Oh, you're right. Let me in. I swear it'll be quick, okay?" It said now in a demonic voice. I just stopped responding, and the creature also stopped after that. The sirens had stopped, but I still was on the floor. I was on that metallic floor for around an hour before I checked my phone. It was now 1:36 in the morning. I decided to get up and head back to my room. I was in better spirits now when I went to my room and decided to get something to eat, and I headed to the roof of everything with a foldable chair that I found in the hallway. I went up the stairs to the roof and I opened up the latch, unfolded the chair, and I sat down. I admired the stars. Yeah, this might be hell on earth, but that doesn't mean it isn't pretty. I looked around the roof and saw a little hut at the corner of it. I got up and headed over to it. It was a little room with a desk and chair, and there were papers splattered everywhere. There were drawings of the man and pictures of the man before me. He was a black guy with a muscular build, had short hair, and looked very clean. He had a picture of what looked like to be his family on the desk with a camera next to it. I opened the drawer and found many pictures taken, presumably trying to take a picture of the man, but every picture looked like a liminal space. I tried to turn on the camera, but it was broken. The lens was shattered, and so was the control panel that would flicker every time that I tried to tap it. I went back to my foldable chair, and not long after, I passed out. Thankfully, by some miracle, I woke up at 8:30 so I wouldn't be late for my first patrol. I got up and headed to my room, and I went inside and stood next to the door waiting until it was 9. Yeah, this is my last 9 a.m. patrol, I thought to myself. I looked at my phone to confirm my suspicions, and sure enough, it was the 26th. I took the elevator, and my 9 a.m. patrol and 12 p.m. patrol were fine. I would see things out of the corner of my eye like normal, but I didn't look and I just kept going. I got to my 4 p.m. patrol and I made it to the lobby and strolled into the water park, keeping my eyes forward as usual. I saw the man and I didn't flinch though. I just turned around nonchalantly and went around the fence and sprinted to my room. I checked the cameras per usual and looked out the window to see the man looking at me. From the water park, he wasn't in frame of any cameras, and so I called Alex. "Alex?" I waited, but she didn't respond. Screw this, I gotta go to the roof. I looked back out the window and saw the face of this man's bones break and him crawl on all fours, skittering towards the hotel lobby. Shit, I basically ran my door over and ran to the stairs. I opened the door and heard the echoing of bones cracking and it heading up the steps. I screamed in my head and ran to the latch and pulled on the ladder. It felt like an eternity climbing the ladder, hearing the skittering getting closer behind me. I got to the top of the ladder and heard the monster right there. I was pushing myself up when I felt it grab a hold of my leg. I screamed and kicked at it until its grip went loose. However, while its grip had loosened, it clawed my leg the entire way down. I screamed out in pain, closing the latch and then clutching my leg. It wasn't anything deep, but he had gotten me pretty good and there was a lot of blood. I hobbled over to the booth and got the med kit and wrapped my leg up. I then screamed at my walkie-talkie, calling out for Alex. Alex, where are you? It's at my floor."
My God, I'm so sorry, Santiago.
I heard from her instantly. I knew she was messing around with me, so I just said, "Come over as quickly as you can, alright?"
On my way.
She said in that playful, cheery tone like she didn't know what was going on. I could still hear the scuffling below me, but I kept all my focus on the pain in my leg.
I dealt with him, sorry about that one.
I heard come from my walkie. "Yeah, thanks," I said, annoyed. I hobbled out of the booth and went down the latch into my room. It felt weird being down there again. I went downstairs at 8 and did my patrol as usual, and nothing happened. I came back up and saw the man on camera 1. I turned it off and got the salt and put it at the edges of the door. I am kinda getting the hang of this, I told myself, patting myself on the back. I looked at the camera, seeing the man trying to break through the door in the camera, but nothing could be heard like last time. It eventually went away and I went back out at 11 p.m. As I left the lobby, I could see Sydney in the distance getting closer. I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in forever. I hobbled around my side of the cruise as quickly as I could while following my map, and I got back as soon as possible. I walked into the hotel lobby with a sense of euphoria. I went up into my room, turned off the lights, closed my blinds, and put the Bible on the nightstand and turned off the cameras. Last time doing this, I thought to myself. I then got in bed, elevating my leg on some pillows because that's what I thought I should do, and I drifted off to sleep. I woke up to the sound of scratching, and still being drowsy, I kind of ignored it for a little bit until I heard it. 10. In my head, oh come on, not again. The scratching got louder, and he was now combining rules, wanting to trick me. Which one do I do first? Get out of bed and turn the lights on, or I tell it that I'm not scared and then do what? But I don't know if I'll have enough time for both. 9. My mind was racing. I could feel the sweat begin to lubricate my palms. 8. The scratching became more insistent, unrelenting, and I could feel his bloodlust. You don't scare me. 7. The scratching ceased, and I glued my eyes shut. 6. It opened the door and skittered away. 5. I got out of bed as quickly as I could. I reached to turn the TV on and set my sights on the bathroom. 4. I turned the camera on and ran towards the bathroom. 3. I turned the bathroom light on. 2. I reached and flicked the main light on. 1. I dove into the closet, closing it but not having enough time to lock it. My leg was hurting so bad and I wanted to wince, but I heard the door creak open and I held my breath and closed my eyes. I heard bone-cracking footsteps right next to me and heavy breathing. It was like he knew that it wasn't locked. He walked around the room slowly, waiting for me to breathe so that he could kill me, but I never did. He was rhythmic and methodic with his steps, like it was a dance of some sorts. I counted 40 seconds before he scurried out of my room, opening and shutting the door and moving down the hallway. I puked out of pain and exhaustion, and let's just say it definitely wasn't pretty. I hyperventilated and winced, holding my leg that I sacrificed to hide from the monster. I grabbed my clothes and used them to help myself up. I made sure that my door was locked and I hopped in bed and then looked at my grave mistake. I had left the blinds open. No, I closed them. The faceless man must have done it. I said out loud, realizing that he had opened them. And then I heard the dreadful tapping on the window and forgot what to do. I pulled out the rule sheet and it read, Rule number 6, close your blinds before you go to sleep. If you fail to do this, you'll wake up to a tapping on your window. Do not look. If this happens, run to the stairs and run to the roof. Sleep here until your next patrol. I got up, wincing still, and ran to the latch. I then heard the same sound behind me, but I was faster getting to the latch this time and got up before he could catch me. I crawled onto the roof, shutting the latch behind me, and I fell asleep right there on the spot. The rules were right. The room felt comfortable. It was like home up here. I felt safe. I could hear the faceless man, but I didn't care. I fell asleep and I slept like a baby. I woke up to the sound of the ship horn blaring. I looked at my phone and it was 10 a.m. I got up and looked over the roof and saw hundreds of people entering the ship. I had never felt so much glee in my life looking at people. I hobbled down the roof and into my room. I packed all my clothes into my suitcase along with my $5,000. And then I heard Alex's voice come through the walkie-talkie.
Bye, Santi. Hope to see you again.
She said now in a sinister voice. Yeah, see ya. I said, putting the rules and Bible in the same drawers that I had found them in. I put the walkie-talkie in last. I hobbled as quickly as I could into the elevator. I pressed lobby and I checked my phone. Finally service. As the door shut, I felt something in the air change. I looked up to see the faceless man staring right back at me. Only the glass elevator doors separated us now. My heart dropped and I started whimpering. No, you can't get me now, it's all over. It got closer and closer with each floor. I started praying. It got to floor 2 and he was still there. Please, no, please, I said, closing my eyes. The elevator dinged and I squinted one eye open. Looking at me dumbly was a grandma and her grandkid. Hello, the grandma said in a warm tone while the kid looked at me crazy. I exhaled a huge breath. Hey, I said, hobbling past them. I made my way to the casino and went through where everybody was coming from. Looking back at my room, I saw the man looking at me. I gave him the finger and hobbled to the exit of the ship. I exited the ship with no plan other than to get to the airport and go back home. I didn't even care about how I smelled, my leg, or how I looked. I just wanted to be home. I looked at my phone and saw from an anonymous number that my flight was at Redacted Airport at 6 p.m. in Terminal A26 with the ticket. I sent back the middle finger and blocked them, saving the picture and going to the airport. I'm now back home in Honolulu and plan to turn my life around. My leg's fine and I'm planning on going to community college to get a degree in computer science. But I swear every now and then, out of the corner of my eye, maybe in the tree line or peeping behind a house, is that faceless man, staring at me with those empty eye sockets. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. When it comes to spending, sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. That daily coffee habit, those streaming subscriptions, they add up fast without you even noticing. Rocket Money helps you spot those patterns so that you can do something about them and keep more money in your pocket. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Yep, you heard that right. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save, and then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service so that you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Download the Rocket Money app and enter my show name Creepscast in the survey so that they know I sent you. Don't wait. Download the Rocket Money app today and tell them you heard about them from my show. I want the job, I said. It was 2 years ago and I could vividly recall every aspect of that interview. The innocence of those 4 words, the stillness of the gallery, my befuddled reaction to Amy Andrews, the gallery owner whose questions had unsettled me. Her composure never waned. Are you a spiritual man, Mr. Hall? Miss Andrews asked. Yes, I answered. Are we talking about the art? I can't say that I'd be able to give philosophical or religious insights. Oh, don't worry, Miss Andrews replied, smiling. I'm not trying to trip you up. In a way, my question does relate to the paintings, but perhaps not in the way that you might expect. I was a police officer for many years before working as a security guard at the embassy, I said. I had plenty of references. The gallery owner raised a hand, smiling politely. Oh, I've seen your CV. I promise that you don't have to fight your corner, Mr. Hall. I know you're physically capable, but this job takes a toll on a mental level. I nodded my head, ignorantly believing that I understood her. I know, I've worked many solo night shifts at the embassy, but I can handle it. Well, that's not what I mean, she replied. Do you know why my gallery exhibits a permanent display of my sister's artwork? To honor her memory, I said. I saw that news clip a couple of years ago about her admittance to the local psychiatric ward. Harper Andrews, right? I'm sorry, that must have been tough on your family. Not as tough as Harper found it, Miss Andrews replied. Her artwork tells the story of her decline into sickness. Not sickness of the mind, but sickness of the soul. She faced something and captured it in these paintings to protect humanity. Hearing her speak, I thought Amy seemed just as unwell as her sister, but I would soon learn that it was no delusion. Every night on the job is terrifying, but none so much as the first. And I'll never forget Miss Andrews' parting words as she walked out of the door. At night, the paintings must be closely guarded. Left unobserved for too long, they can, well, just make sure you keep watch. What is this, a night at the museum? I mused, trying not to chuckle. Oh no, far worse than fiction. The first hour of my shift was blissfully mundane. Basking in the blue glow of the gallery's security lighting, a perturbing painting eyeballed me from the far wall. It depicted a lanky, pencil-thin man with frightfully long legs and a pair of white eyes which seemed to follow me around the room, as all freakish eyes in paintings do. As I strolled around the gallery, following Miss Andrews' strict rule of observing the paintings often, I took a closer look at the white-eyed man. I shivered at his janky jaw, which hung abnormally loosely. He wore jet-black trousers, but his monstrous bony torso was shirtless, and he was the farthest a man could be from looking human. I stopped to read the plaque beneath the painting of the haunting figure. The exactor, the one who exacts torture. He longs to break free. He will devour mankind. I hurried past the painting, reasonably certain that nobody would ever dream of stealing artwork so horrifying, and no need to guard it too closely. But the gallery didn't exactly become more joyous as I continued my round. They were petrifying. I should have given the paintings more than a cursory glance before applying for the job position. Another painting portrayed a young girl, no more than 10 years of age, who wore a bright red pinafore, plaited brunette hair, and a blank face. Not figuratively, blank. In place of eyes and nose and a mouth, there was only skin. Taut flesh painted with smooth brushstrokes that made Harper's intentions abundantly clear. The artist had not accidentally smudged the face. She had purposefully neglected to give the little girl any features. Harper's youth dies. As we age, we slowly come to life. We sin, they know that, they know everything. There were countless paintings of dreadful scenes too. Cities in ruin, the end of the world. Endless infernos of melting flesh. And they were the lucky ones who were offered a swift mercy. The survivors in the apocalyptic paintings were tortured in gruesome ways by dreadful inhuman men like the one in the first painting. I usually have a strong stomach, but something about those paintings filled me with unbearable dread. The apocalyptic art seemed so visceral. As I viewed it, I was certain that I heard the screams of the last humans on Earth, felt the heat of the flames on my skin, saw the exactors move. And then there was a painting of the art gallery, The plaque read, "Prison. They entered our world, so I locked them here." Feeling suitably terrified, I scurried to the sofa by the gallery's entrance and plopped myself down. I work a day job and the night shift is just my way of making ends meet. The exhaustion of that jam-packed day finally hit me. It was only when I sat down on the sofa that fatigue walloped me like a wall. My eyelids closed. An hour later, a thrumming sound startled me awake. I twisted my head to see a notification on my phone, chuckling in relief. I opened the message from Kara, my wife, welcoming the distraction from my isolated, soundless night shift. But it was an odd message. "I was telling my mom about your new job and she said that you should look for another one. Apparently there's always adverts for the night shift on Facebook, and her friend's husband had a mental breakdown after one shift. He won't talk to anyone about what happened." There was another thrumming sound, but it wasn't a vibration from my phone. It was a muffled voice. My head snapped up in time to catch a silhouette vanishing behind one of the gallery walls. I managed to stifle a scream, but I lost my composure and clammed up. I contemplated running out of the gallery, but something stopped me, and it wasn't the prospect of being fired. It was those paintings of Armageddon. I rose to my feet using the flashlight on my phone to illuminate the dimly lit gallery floor. That muffled sound repeated again, haunting me. A ghostly groan of some emotion that I couldn't quite place, but I knew it terrified me. And when I rounded the corner, I found myself facing something utterly inexplicable. The girl from Harper's youth dies. A young version of Harper, I could only assume. I trembled on the spot as she took clunky steps towards me with her frail and near-skeletal legs. She continued to groan, seemingly speaking beneath the flesh that covered her entire face. "I can't understand you," I whispered in horror as the ghastly girl stopped a foot in front of me. I found myself leaning forwards, driven by a force beyond my control. And then the most horrifying thing happened. My cheek twisted to the side, allowing my ear to melt through the phantom pool of the girl's face. I screamed silently, terrified to find that I was unable to move my body or utter a sound. Then, with my ear beneath the flesh on Harper's horrendous and featureless face, I could finally hear the words that she had been repeating in a muffled and ghoulish voice. "Why did you close your eyes?" The malformed ghost asked in a distorted cry. My body was suddenly hurled to the floor and the little girl fled into the shadows. My eyes shot to the far wall and I found that my gut had achieved the impossible. It sank to a deeper realm of fear. He was gone. The exactor was a blank canvas. The horrible entity had escaped its painting. Harper's disembodied voice whispered beside my ear, scaring the life out of me. "Find him. He's hiding." I looked up at the ghostly girl's painting. Harper had returned to the canvas, but she was adopting a different pose. Her index finger was pointing at the painting of the art gallery. I yelped in fright, seeing what she had noticed. Behind one of the painted windows on the empty top floor of the building, that inhuman man stood and watched me. Legs shaking, I walked across the gallery to the set of stairs in the back corner. They led to an out-of-bounds floor. Miss Andrews made that abundantly clear. But she also made it clear that I had to keep my eyes on the artwork, and I failed at that. I didn't really have any options. Quivering, I crept up the creaky wooden stairs to a floor that was littered with unhung paintings. The frames were shrouded in white sheets, and at the far end of the room, illuminated only by the moonlight which poured through the murky glass panes, I saw something truly terrifying. The exactor. He stood as tall as the ceiling and his large form was crouching over an uncovered painting. As I crept closer, I saw what had captivated the terrible creature. It was one of Harper's apocalyptic paintings, depicting a world in flames, and the exactor was melding its shriveled, unclothed arm with the canvas. much as young Harper sank my ear through her flash. However, as I approached the abomination, casting my flashlight upon him, its flash had started to sizzle, and it unleashed a hideous hissing sound. At first, I thought that the light had hurt it, but then I realized it had become aware of the guards' watchful eyes upon it. I finally realized the power of keeping watch. I knew why I was there. "Cast it away," Harper's voice whispered. "How?" I cried. The man spun around and I screamed at the sight of his wretched white eyes. They were worse in the flesh and he was far larger than he had appeared in the painting. The entity lunged at me, coiling its bony hands around my neck, squeezing the light out of my soul. I slipped into the darkness and the exactor howled at me, a howl that sounded like a boat's horn. "Tell it to return to its cell," Harper croaked. "Tell it that you won't stop looking at it until it does what you say." I wheezed, watching flickering images in the exactor's blank eyes, prophecies of a direful destruction, a fiery vision of mankind's end at the hands of this terrifying apparition and its demonic army. He intended to scare me, but the thought of such a horrific future only motivated me to keep my eyes open. "I won't stop," I said, slowly choking. "Until you stop." Inhuman flesh burning beneath the weight of my vision, the exactor screeched in fury, but I thought the world might already be doomed. If I had passed out, I would have left the demon unguarded and free to wreak havoc upon mankind. But in some favorable twist of fate, it released my neck, and I fell to the ground, and it too must have been close to death. I crawled downstairs and the canvases were filled with paint once more. Everything was back in its place, and the strangest thing is that I didn't hang up my hat. I didn't call it a day. When Miss Andrews came to the gallery at 6 in the morning, she seemed fully prepared to watch another traumatized guard quit the job. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not after seeing the exactor's apocalyptic desire. Too much is at stake. For those of you who missed the first post, my night shifts as an art gallery's security guard are more horrifying than anything a person should endure. My job isn't to protect the paintings, it's to protect humanity from the paintings. Each canvas is a paranormal cell. The artist, Harper Andrews, even contained a terrifying interpretation of her younger self in a portrait as a safeguard. The faceless child isn't even the worst thing in there. There are paintings of mankind's doom, hellfire, Armageddon. And then there's the painting of the exactor, an inhuman man tall as a tree, with woefully white eyes and a limp jaw. He and his malformed minions are imprisoned in the gallery's exhibits, and they seek freedom. They long to eternally torture mankind in unimaginable ways. They plot a fate worse than death. I've spoken about my first shift, but I'm sure you didn't think that I had gone 2 years without another incident. One particular evening about 4 months ago, a text conversation with my wife took a horrifying turn. "You can quit the day job, surely. You're making plenty of money from the gallery. You just want to spend more time with me. Oh, you love me. While it is a little suspicious that you spend so much time away from home, have you got another woman on the side? Amy's hot in a squint your eyes kind of way. There's a higher chance of me hooking up with one of Harper's demons. Ooh, that reminds me. I just bought one of the paintings. I couldn't resist. Crap, I should have told my wife about my work. I should have told her about the terrible nature of the things that I guard. She never would have bought the artwork if she had known it were more than paint on a canvas. After reading her message, I hurriedly rang her. "Oh, please tell me you were joking," I said, shaking. "Are you okay, Frank? You sound weird," Kara replied. "Why did you have to buy one of those paintings?" I asked. "What? Oh, I know you like macabre things," she chortled. "Don't be a baby, you stare at those paintings all night. What's so wrong with having one of them in our living room?" I don't understand why Amy would sell her sister's work," I said. Oh, I pulled her aside for a chat after you showed me around the gallery. Honestly, I can't believe it took you over a year to give me a tour. Such beautiful paintings. Disturbing but beautiful. Harper Andrews is incredibly talented. But what happened to her is sad. Kara sighed. You just made an offer that Amy accepted, I asked. She claimed to have little attachment to it. She said it isn't one of the paintings that demands eyes upon it. Seemed a rude comment because I think it's as great as the rest of her sister's art, but... Kara began. I have to go, I interrupted, hanging up the phone. It was an hour or so before my night shift, but I arrived early. Amy Andrews was engrossed in conversation with the last few gallery visitors of the day, but I quickly dragged her away from the crowd. Fury frothed to the surface of my lips. Why did you sell one of the paintings to Kara? I asked. Miss Andrews answered in an eerily flat tone. I come from a wealthy family, Mr. Hall, but I'm not that wealthy. I have limited income streams and I have to keep the gallery's lights on. Sure, I make money from memberships and fundraising events, but I try to sell paintings too. But Harper, you know they need to be watched at all times, I protested. Oh, not all of them, she said. And that was when I realized which painting was missing from the gallery. There was an empty spot on the wall above the plaque that read, Harper's Youth Dies. What have you done? My sister's demented self-portrait might be horrifying, Mr. Hall, but it doesn't intend to harm us. It's not one that needs to be watched. And your wife paid handsomely for it. Miss Andrews explained, shrugging. I gripped my employer's arm in a moment of madness that could have cost my job and, for all I knew, the future of mankind. On that first night, young Harper was the entity that kept watch over me. I hissed furiously. Your sister painted herself for a reason. Everything in this gallery has a purpose. Don't you understand that? For a flicker of a moment, I was certain that something flashed in Amy Andrews' eyes. Something black, and the corner of her lips twitched as if to reveal that she were well aware of what she had done. But her mouth quickly returned to its normal position. I pay you to watch over the exhibits. You shouldn't need anyone or anything to watch over you. Screw this, I spat. I'm going home and I'm bringing that painting back with me. Miss Andrews huffed, glancing at her watch. 55 minutes until your shift begins. I would hurry. I drove home, mind racing with the horror of Miss Andrews' crooked grin. Did she intentionally sell the painting to sabotage the gallery? Don't be foolish. If she were that evil, she could have just left the paintings unwatched, freeing the exactor into the world. I tried to still my throbbing heartbeat as I pulled onto our street. After hurriedly parking, I didn't even close the car door behind me. I raced into our darkened home and started screaming at the top of my lungs. Kara, where are you? In the living room, she shouted. Why are we yelling? I rushed into the room and my chest loosened a bit. There was no sign of destruction, just my wife sitting on the sofa in a well-lit room. Harper's Youth Dies hung on the wall, but the girl's ghastly form remained in its canvas. Oh, thank God, I exhaled. What is your deal with this creepy little girl? Kara asked, laughing. I have to take it back, Kara. I'll make sure that Miss Andrews gives us a refund. My wife rose to her feet and walked over to the painting, stroking Harper's featureless face. I shuddered in terror, waiting for the ghoul to leap free from its frame. I assumed that she wouldn't hurt us, but I wasn't certain of anything. Don't come and give her a stroke, my wife teased. She doesn't bite. I looked at my phone. I had a half hour until the start of my shift. Miss Andrews had made it clear what would happen if I weren't on time. I feared that she might do something worse than fire me. She might leave the paintings unattended. I'll get you a better painting, I said. Something creepy from another gallery. Just anything other than a Harper Andrews piece. Please. Oh, would it make you happier if I were to draw a smiley face on her? Kara asked. My wife dipped her finger into her glass of water, and I cried in agony as she drew a crude pair of dots and a pencil-thin smile on Harper's featureless face. Kara frowned at my gaping maw when she finished. Hey, relax, we own it, she said. And besides, it'll dry, don't worry. I walked over to her and seized her hands tightly, taking a deep breath. Kara, I said gently, I'm begging you. She frowned. Oh, I know that look, Frank. You're actually scared. Why? Just tell me and I'll let you take the painting back. You saw a ghost when you were young, didn't you? I asked. Kara nodded. My dad, shortly after the car crash. Hard to believe it, but I did. Well, I know you believe. You said that you once saw your grandma's ghost, didn't you? I gripped her hands tightly and nodded. Right, so we believe in spirituality. Well, this painting, I mean all of Harper's paintings, are gateways to something unearthly, and that is why I guard them. I'm sorry that it took me so long to tell you. My wife hung her head and shook it. You talk in your sleep, you know. You've been having nightmares for months, talking about an entity and the end of the world. I knew there was something wrong with you. The light suddenly cut out and a wisp of wind like a hissing voice filled the room. Kara shrieked and leapt into my arms. I shuddered, keeping her close to my chest so that she couldn't see what I saw. Harper's youth dies. The watery marks on Harper's featureless face glowed faintly in the darkness, a dim white light. And the most terrifying part was that the droplets which formed the smile had inexplicably transformed into a sulk. May I take it? I asked Kara in a whisper. She nodded, face burrowed deeply into my chest, and so I guided her to the bedroom and instructed her to shut the door. I checked my phone. 20 minutes until my shift. I seized the painting from the wall, sprinted out of the house, and lunged into my car. When I arrived at the art gallery, the lights were off and Amy's car was nowhere in sight. Fortunately, I was on time for my shift, but I had no way of knowing how long she had left the place unattended. I hurried inside and immediately hung Harper's Youth Dies above its plaque. The gallery was full again. I looked at the painting of the exactor. I was relieved to see that the monstrosity was still encaged, but something still felt wrong. There was a churning chasm in my gut. You're not in the art gallery, Harper's entity whispered in a distorted voice. I finally saw what she meant. The colors of my surroundings had started to swirl. The gallery walls, the floor of the paintings, and even my hands looked murky. The world was composed of paint. I was composed of paint. And when I looked into the street, I saw the towering edges of a painting's frame. I was trapped in prison. Harper's depiction of the art gallery, which you may remember from my first post. And I knew that I was trapped in the painting because I could see the real world beyond the canvas. My memories flooded back. When I had entered the real art gallery, the exactor had tricked me. He stood in his painting and everything seemed fine. I looked into those horrible white eyes, and that's when its mouth tore open to swallow me. I screeched into the nothingness. Never had I felt such a nightmarish horror before, not even on my first night in the gallery. I felt dead, worse than dead. I thought that I had entered hell itself. I thought that I had failed at my job and the rapture had commenced. I thought of so many sickening possibilities as the exactor's blackened void had engulfed me. Squirming inside his darkened body, I was carried by the inhuman man across the gallery floor, and he aggressively spat me into the canvas of prison. I had forgotten that. He made me forget that I had left the real world. It's looking for an exit, Harper's voice croaked. Me too, I cried. I looked at Harper's painting and she wasn't there. In her place, there was a doorway with a flickering green exit sign above it. I felt the brushstrokes of that painted world stretch and strain. The canvas was crushing me and I didn't belong there. My painted form had tightened, and I rushed to the doorway that Harper had created, terrified of what might happen if I were to stay in that false world for a moment longer. As my hand met the painted canvas within the painted canvas, my body liquefied and merged with the exit on the canvas. A blackness still and serene enveloped me, and then I found myself lying on a tiled floor, a real tiled floor, choking. Back in reality, I gazed across the gallery and my eyes met a terrible sight. The contents of every painting had spilled onto the floor. The exactor stood proudly amidst his minions, plotting in a sharp whisper. I had expected a cacophonous roar of noise from the apocalyptic demons, but something about the near silence of their scheming was even more frightening. Still in the distance, I could hear human screams again, the apocalyptic sound of mankind being tortured in an endless oblivion. The agonizing cries were almost tuneful, in a terribly dissonant way. Choral screaming, humanity's horrifying final song. Suddenly, in unearthly unison, the exactor's minions, smaller versions of him but no less terrifying, snapped their heads backwards to face me, as if the brutal bones in their necks had jellied. I screamed at their upside-down faces which hung over their unclothed backs. They were wide-eyed and slack-jawed, eyeing me from the middle of the room. They wheezed as their skin sizzled beneath the weight of my eyes upon them. "Back to your paintings," I feebly shrieked. There was nothing commanding about my tone. Pure terror drove me, and the exactor could see that. His eyes pierced mine as they had on that first night. In them I saw nothing, the absence of anything. And by that, I mean the end of everything, the end of man and the end of ends. He tried to fill me with dread beyond imagination, and he succeeded. But it was the same fateful error that he had made on that first night. I thought of Kara, my parents, my friends, everyone that I love. That was what motivated me while my eyes watered under the strain of looking at those horrid things. Ghoulish voices chittered that I must either close my eyelids or die. I didn't fall for the entity's egregious schemes. I clenched my fists, armed only with my eyes and sheer willpower. The minions retreated first. Flesh burning, they scurried backwards, dragging their upside-down heads and misshapen limbs with them, back into the flames of their painted paradise. And it'll always be a dream, I told myself. But the exactor remained, mouth gaping so wide that it dropped past his shoulders. His flesh scorched. Wisps of smoke billowed from his shirtless torso and raggedy trousers. In one final fit of rage, he took powerful strides towards me and outstretched one of his slender arms. I caught his wrist before those gnarled, ghastly fingers could wrap around my neck, and the pain was unexplainable. It was a deep burning of the mind, not the body. The exactor's last-ditch attempt to incapacitate the guard who was standing between it and the apocalypse. I saw Kara. She was sitting in our living room smiling at something on the wall. I could only watch in unbridled horror as her flesh melted before my very eyes. Horrifyingly, she continued to smile even when she had been reduced to smoldering, bloody meat on the sofa. The exactor showed me what she saw. On the wall there hung a painting of her house burning to the ground in the midst of mankind's total annihilation. On the streets, the exactor's minions inflicted unspeakable horrors upon humanity. A demon gutted a woman with the protruding bone from her own severed limb. That's the only scene that I can put into writing. The rest are too dreadful. Wait a minute, it's not real, it's another trick. Kara wouldn't smile at such a thing. My eyes ached under the immense strain of watching that unholy apparition. But the exactor caved first. Unable to bear my eyes upon it, it wriggled free from my grip, taking what appeared to be excruciating steps back to its canvas. And when it returned to its frame, the choral screaming ceased. The gallery was still and silent. I spent the rest of my shift standing in that exact spot, eyeballing the paintings before me. I didn't speak and I didn't move. Before I left the building at the end of my shift, I quickly glanced back at Prison, the painting that had trapped me. Dread gripped my heart, and 4 months later it still hasn't released me. I can't stop thinking about how it felt to be within that canvas. How will I ever know that I'm in the real world? What if the apocalypse has already happened? I might be living in a painting right now. Well, there you go. Another direful tale from the art gallery. Another near miss. Just part and parcel of the job, huh? Since my first shift, nothing has been the same. Every passing day feels worse than the last. The impending apocalypse cast a long shadow over my life. I explained everything to Kara, and she knows why I can't quit. And now you know that I worry about something other than the exactor. Amy Andrews. Something's wrong with her. Perhaps I should speak to the one person who could actually give me some answers. I think I need to visit the local psych ward. Harper Andrews, the woman who could provide answers to all my questions. Yesterday afternoon, I visited her at the local psychiatric ward. I know why you're here, Harper said. The woman was slender and she wore pristine white attire. Her brunette hair was glistening in the midday sun. It hung in prim and proper plaits which made me shudder. She was the spitting image of her painting. Harper's youth dies. That was unnerving given that she was a couple of decades older than the version of herself that she had painted. The paintings, I eventually replied. Harper smiled, motioning at the seat opposite her in the deserted canteen. I nodded awkwardly and slumped into the stiff plastic chair on the other side of the table. A member of staff loitered in the canteen doorway, keeping a watchful eye over us. "And 2 years on the job, right?" Harper asked. "I think you would have summoned the courage to visit me a long time ago, if this were only about the exactor." I shivered at the very mention of the name, and I quickly glanced at the member of staff, just to ensure that he only stood 6 feet tall. For a fleeting moment, I thought the nightmarish man from the painting had been hunching in the doorway and watching me. "I'm not blaming you," Harper continued. "I just want to save time. My sister isn't evil. In fact, she's a kind-hearted woman, and maybe part of her is still in there, but it's not the part that's in control. She longs to free the exactor and the others." I paused for a long time, staring into the dejected eyes of the woman before me. She looked sharp, focused, well, not at all what I had expected. Why haven't you with Amy?" I trailed off. Harper sighed, reading my mind. "Yeah, I suppose killing her would have brought an end to things, wouldn't it? Yet somewhere deep down she's still my sister. I'm sorry, and why, you might wonder, hasn't she already freed the creatures from their painted prisons?" "Now that final question is the one that really needs to be answered, I think," I said. Harper nodded. "Do you have your phone with you?" "Yeah, why?" "Record my story," she said. "I need you to document the knowledge that I'm about to pass on to you. Nobody has ever believed me, but you will. You've seen what's at stake." The year was 2003, and I was 8 years old and Amy was in her 20s. My birth certainly caused an upheaval. Mom was a full-time lawyer and Dad was a historian. They thought their days of parenting were long behind them. "Mom, did I ruin Dad's life?" I once asked. "Oh, you were the best curveball that life threw at us, darling." My mom promised, and we chuckled. And Dad loved us, but he spent so much time abroad. He wasn't quite so busy or successful in his youth, so I think that he worried that he had been a better father to Amy. One fateful day, he sought to rectify that. "Machu Picchu," he said. "Let's go, you and me." "What's in Pikachu?" I asked. My dad laughed. "Machu Picchu, it's a lost city. I think you'll love it. You could paint it. Your talents are wasted on the dull scenery around here." I didn't think that I would enjoy ancient ruins, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to spend time with Dad, and he seemed so excited about the place. It was stunning. My 8-year-old brain wasn't immature enough to overlook that. And after hours of watching my father excavate what he called a point of interest, the man finally started to dance jubilantly. I stopped painting to see what enthralled him. The fruit of his labor was a large slab of stone, and it was covered with dreadful etchings of ghastly creatures. My dad started jabbering ecstatically about the magnitude of what he had uncovered. He spent a decade connecting dots between the mysterious vanishings of advanced cultures. They were indicators of a destructive force, a plague greater than anything earthly. He said there were entities which sought to destroy humanity, though their origin remained a mystery. They certainly weren't bound by physical laws. And my father uncovered detailed writings on rituals which successfully contained the abominations. He said salvation always came from imprisoning the entities, but they couldn't be killed and they would always seek freedom. That was what terrified me. They would always seek freedom, and my father held their prison in his very hands. He had unearthed something which should have been left alone. When we returned to England, I slipped into my father's study and found his translated text. I had a terrible feeling about the stone slab that he had brought home, and so I studied the ritual that could imprison the entities. It involved detailed drawings and a watcher. But who was watching the drawings while they were buried beneath the earth in Machu Picchu? Well, nobody. My father's research seemed to suggest that the Inca artist in Machu Picchu had uncovered a new ritual, something which allowed the Incas to trap the demons more successfully than their predecessors. If my father had only let it be, you would still be living a normal life, Frank Hull. None of us would be in this mess. But things quickly took a dark turn. My parents started bickering about that stone slab. Dad would obsessively stare at it until the early hours of the morning. He said that it spoke to him. When my mother couldn't take it anymore, she left. Amy and I were distraught and we hated our father. And that was when my sister did something stupid. She destroyed the stone slab with a sledgehammer. Everything quickly fell apart. The exactor and his deformed creatures steadily rose from the shattered stone, and I fled the room. It was the moment that I had dreaded, the prophecy which had riddled me with nightmares. I locked myself in my room and unboxed the paintings that I had completed in preparation weeks ago. And to imprison the freed demons in a new picture, however, a ritual was required. As many artists had done before me, I dislodged one of my teeth. Bloody gummed and teary from the agony, I started to shakily etch my name into each of the paintings with my baby tooth, and the most horrifying thing happened. One by one, black masses started to slither under my door. The creatures were unwillingly latching into their painted forms. They were being trapped in a fresh prison. The house felt unnaturally still. I crept out of my bedroom and called for my family. When I entered the living room, I shuddered. The demons were gone, but my dad was sitting in his rocking chair. His eyes were vacant and he was smiling. It was a wicked grin, something beyond your darkest imagination. Blood oozed through finger tears in the fabric of his shirt. He had been clawing at his own flesh. He was still alive, but he didn't move a muscle or utter a word. He just grinned. Amy, meanwhile, was curled on the sofa in a fetal position. She was bawling her eyes out, and when the police arrived, they discovered something disturbing. Mom never left. Her body was found in the garden shed, and she had been decomposing for weeks. I never saw the scene, but I vividly remember one of the paramedics throwing up on the grass. Our father went to prison and Amy became my guardian. I explained everything to her, but she didn't believe me. And so I kept a daily watch over the paintings, and years later, I used my inheritance money to open an art gallery. I thought that it would lessen the burden if other eyes were on the paintings. Amy helped me run the place, and she had her hands in lots of different money pots, so she didn't mind that the gallery was a bit of a money burner. However, one day she changed. She came home from the gallery with a vacant look in her eyes, a look that reminded me of Dad. She told me that she finally believed my story. She saw the exactor step out of its painting. I couldn't always be at the gallery, but Amy promised that she would never leave the paintings unattended. She admitted that she had gone out to grab some food before locking up for the evening. If she hadn't returned in time, I suppose that you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. The world would have already ended. Anyway, my sister changed over the following years. She grew cold and distant, and I started to see a darkness in her eyes, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. I became so fearful of her and her malevolent smile that I had a nervous breakdown, and that was her ticket. Well, the exactor's ticket. She had me committed to this ward 4 years ago. I suppose that the exactor thought that without me in the way, she could puppeteer Amy to free him from the painting. All she had to do was make sure that nobody looked at him. But why haven't things already fallen apart? Why did she hire guards to keep watch? Well, she still plays by my rules because I have something that the exactor needs. If it had so wished, that terrifying creature would have driven my sister to kill me, much as it drove my father to kill my mother. But it needs the tooth that I used in the ritual. The exactor always uses slaves to achieve that goal. It seeps into people's minds. At its behest, I'm certain my dad must have destroyed whatever ink and tool was used to etch the drawings on the stone slab. So even if Amy were to close her eyes or better yet destroy the paintings, it still wouldn't be enough to free the entities. It sounds like watching them might be unnecessary then, huh? As long as I keep the tooth in and you can just quit your security role and call it a day. No way that the exactor can fulfill its destiny, right? The problem is that an unwatched exactor, while unable to end the world, becomes freer and freer with every passing moment. Free enough to find me without Amy's help, perhaps, and infiltrate my mind to find the tooth's location. As long as somebody keeps watch, they remain in their paintings. Their real power lies in servants, my dad and now Amy. She visits me often and she only wants one thing from me, the tooth, but I still hold the power. She does what I say. Otherwise, I've threatened to end things. The secret dies with me. The exactor uses her to wear me down, but I'm stronger than it thinks. And that's everything, Frankl. The rest is a mystery even to me. I stopped recording at that point and I exhaled deeply. There was so much information to digest. Have you seen the length of that transcript? Sorry to anyone who didn't prepare themselves for such a gargantuan body of text. Amy's trying to sabotage things, I explained. She let Harper's youth dies out of the gallery. Harper sighed. Well, it might be time for me to. No, I didn't mean that, I firmly said. Harper's eyes were brimming with tears. I'm tired, Frank, I'm so tired, I'm only one person. Well, you're not alone, I said. I'll keep watch. She sniffled. And what happens when you reach your breaking point? Maybe this is bigger than us, maybe we need to tell someone. I scoffed. Like who, the government? You think that would be a good idea? Give the exactor hundreds of minds to infiltrate. It's dangerous enough that your paintings are visible to the public. You and I won't live forever to fight the good fight, Harper pointed out. Well, then we'll keep looking for people to take up the mantle. Or maybe we'll eventually figure out what that Incan artist did to truly seal the lid on these monstrosities, I said. He found a way to put them in the bin for good. No watcher needed. Harper sighed. Well, I guess there's one more thing that you should know. What's that? Well, the tooth, she said. It's in the house. Whoa, stop, I barked. What are you doing? The secret dies with you, remember? Yeah, but Amy's never going to stop looking for it. "So you need to keep her away from the base," Harper began. "Please," I cried. "I don't know why you're telling me this, I have a bad feeling." I looked up to find that the member of staff had left, and that was when the clamp tightened on my gut. The sun seemed to dim and an emptiness filled the room. I know that sounds like a contradiction, but I'm sure Harper felt it too. Her eyes widened. "Frank, is there a red Range Rover in the parking lot?" Legs trembling, I crept over to the canteen window and squinted. A graying cloud hovered heavily above. Blue sky lay beyond the solitary omen. There seemed to be no other visitors beside my white Mitsubishi. There was only a crimson Range Rover. I shrieked in horror. "Frank," Harper began, "you need to." A splintering sound echoed around the canteen, and I spun around to see something sickeningly sinister. Harper's neck had been snapped backwards and her upside-down head hung over the back of her chair, much like those menacing exactors in the art gallery so many months ago. In the doorway of the canteen, there stood a figure too tall for the frame. I screamed, squinting my eyes, but it was Amy. She seemed to be a regular height, but I know what I saw for a fleeting second. I chased her out of the building, heart racing as I prepared to meet a similar fate. But the exactor spared me, it had other plans. Besides, Amy was nimble. I was no threat. She had driven away before I could even reach her. That was 3 hours ago. I know where she's going. The good news is that their family house is in Ireland, so it'll take some time for Amy to get there. The bad news is that it'll take some time for me to get there too. I'm currently waiting for a flight. Tomorrow, the world might end. Cherish your loved ones. I arrived in Ireland after a short flight, but it was too late. The dilapidated house harbored secrets, and though I was armed with Harper's knowledge, the British building still intimidated and mystified me. The terror stemmed from more than vines creeping up walls or the graffitied innards of the haunted house. It was the place's unearthly aura, lingering evil from the horrors that unfolded 20 years earlier. Why did Harper have to tell me where she had hidden the tooth? My hypothesis is that the exactor had wormed its way into her mind. Maybe it finally succeeded in tricking her. I blame myself. Harper was careful for so many years. She lowered her guard around me, lost herself for a second, and that was all the exactor needed. As soon as Harper had exhausted her usefulness, she was slaughtered. I can still see her mangled neck draped over the rigid back of that plastic canteen chair. The basement was a lightless hovel that carried a damp smell. I illuminated the cobweb-ridden room with my phone, and something elicited a blood-curdling scream from my hoarse throat. Amy. She was on her knees, shivering in the center of the room. She didn't even shield her eyes from my light. She only stared into my face with a blank and teary expression, and I realized something horrifying. The exactor was gone. I couldn't see the darkness in her eyes anymore, and if the creature had no use for servants, that could only mean one dreadful thing. The end was nigh. A bottle of hydrochloric acid confirmed that. It lay beside a gaping hole in the floorboard's woodwork. Amy had destroyed Harper's tooth, the only thing giving our eyes the power to imprison those frightful entities in their painted cells. My family's dead," Amy sobbed. It was as if she had been in a trance for years, and only at that moment, decades later, could she finally process the awfulness of what had befallen her loved ones. "Don't worry," I said. "Soon everybody's gonna be dead." The woman bawled, and I wanted to emphasize, but I kept seeing her younger sister's neck, the very neck that Amy had viciously snapped several hours before. It was hard to trust her. "How long has it been?" I asked, pointing at the acid-formed hole in the floor. "I destroyed it shortly before you arrived, within the hour perhaps," Amy absent-mindedly replied. I nodded. How long do you think we have before the world ends? She shrugged. When I freed them as a child, they took time slithering out of the slab. They began constructing legions of creatures from the very dust of her house. Harper must have been upstairs for a couple of hours and the world didn't end. They occupied themselves with torturing my father and me, but I don't want to talk about that. I blocked that trauma so effectively from my mind that I didn't believe Harper's stories for years. Whatever, I sighed. Let's just savor Earth's final hours before hell opens up. Listen, I've been reading my father's texts, Amy sniffed. The ones left in this ransacked house anyway. If we hurry, we could, maybe. Oh, I think it's over, I coldly stated. Amy's eyes sharpened and her brow furrowed as she locked her gaze onto mine. But it wasn't evil that I saw in her eyes. Not the exactor. No, it was resolve. The dying dregs of a desperate human's resolve. That's it? What about Kara? She asked. Are you just going to let everything end? Well, what can we do? As we speak, the horrors are crawling out of their paintings. It won't be long before they wreak havoc upon mankind. And we're not exactly artists, so I doubt that we could whip up. I trailed off, possessed by an inspired idea. The covered paintings on the gallery's top floor. Exact copies of the ones downstairs, I whispered. Amy slowly nodded, gathering my drift. Right. Harper's backups. Backups, she used to say. The name etching ritual. It must be performed by the original artist, I asked. Amy shrugged. Well, the texts only dictate that the one who uses a sacrificial etching tool, their tooth will bind the apocalyptic abhorrences to drawn likenesses. So if I were to etch my name into each of Harper's backup paintings, I thoughtfully whispered, delicately tapping one of my teeth, but then I sighed. We're miles from England. Thousands will have died in the time that we reach the gallery. Amy's eyes widened. You know, there are other ancient rituals that our father detailed in his translated texts. Mayans, Incas, and other ancient cultures learned things that modern people have forgotten. When their cities fell to ruins, these survivors utilized centuries of spiritual teachings to encage the exactor and its legions in prisons. But they used the power of art for other things too. What ritual could save us? I asked. A painting of the gallery, she answered. A doorway to the real gallery. My blood froze. I immediately recalled my terrifying experience in prison, being trapped in a painting that I truly believed to be reality. Harper had freed me from that hellish place with an exit doorway. I swore to myself that I would stay firmly grounded in the real world for the rest of my life. But Amy was suggesting that I willingly step back into that existential hellishness. And how would I ever know that I've returned to the real world? I asked. Now, this wouldn't be like any of the other paintings. It would be a portal, not a prison. You can feel the differences between painted color and real color. Trust me, she said. Even when you were in prison, part of you always knew that something was wrong. Can you deny that? Amy was right. A painted lie can never convince a person forever, but how could I be sure? And then I considered the alternative option, the total extinction of humanity. But we're back at square one, I pointed out. We need a painting of the art gallery to serve as the portal. Do you know how to paint? Can you create a believable likeness of the art gallery on a canvas? I certainly can't. I think you underestimate just how many paintings my sister created in her youth, Amy said, smiling. She guided me out of the basement on shaky legs, continuing to explain things. We had moved to England because Harper couldn't bear this place anymore. But we also moved because I had business contacts in your country. Anyway, I found the perfect little spot for my teenage sister's art gallery. Amy continued her story as we clambered up the creaky stairs. So, what was the first thing my sister did when I showed her the property? She painted the new prison for her macabre paintings. She said that it gives a place power to be included in the ritual. Of course, I didn't believe in her deluded ramblings back then. I had convinced myself that none of these supernatural horrors really happened on the night of our father's breakdown. Anyway, Harper left the painting at this house along with many others. She said she would do a better one at some point. Do you think it's a good enough likeness of the art gallery to work as a teleporter? I asked. Amy gulped. I really hope so. I don't want you to become trapped in some non-existent painted realm. A half-human, half-paint splintered thing. No thanks. Great pep talk, I said. It really makes me want to do this. Amy opened the door to Harper's bedroom and matter-of-factly replied, It's not like you have a choice, is it? Unless you want me to do it. I shook my head. Inside Harper's old bedroom, a stack of half-finished paintings lay on her dusty, neglected duvet. Amy and I sifted through the pile, eventually finding Harper's early attempt at creating prison. Obviously, before moving to England and turning the property into an art gallery, Harper's visions of grandeur were a teenage fantasy. Fortunately, her painted vision was not too far removed from what the art gallery became. I wanted to do something for her, Amy somberly explained, tearily cradling the painting. After Mom and Dad died, Harper wasn't the same. I thought a place for her art would help her heal as much as the paintings horrified me. I didn't want to talk about Harper. The horror was too fresh, too raw. How do we turn prison into a portal? I asked. Sacrifice, Amy quietly replied. It's always about sacrifice. So another tooth? I asked. To bend the construct of space, Mayans bent the mind. That's what my dad wrote, Amy said, handing me a bottle of Jack Daniels. I laughed. You're kidding with me. I need to drink to save the world. To travel elsewhere, you have to loosen the connection to your present position in space and time. Amy replied with a deadpan expression. I guess harder drugs might work, but this is all I've got. A bottle of Jack. I planned on drinking myself to death after all. I slugged most of the liquid down my throat, ignoring the burning sensation and the desire to vomit. Touch the canvas, Amy instructed, and repeat the following words after me. Try to pronounce each syllable clearly. I placed my hands on the painting. Miss Andrews began to speak in an ancient language and I followed suit. After several minutes, the alcohol had started to hit my system and I had to concentrate incredibly hard. I didn't want to slur a single letter. The colors of the painting started to swirl and then something horrifying happened. My flesh began to melt. I shrieked, truly believing that Amy Andrews had deceived me. I watched my skin liquefy, meshing with the canvas, and my jaw dropped in terror. It's working, Amy cried. Good luck, Frank. What about you? I murmured, slipping into the canvas. Amy smiled tearily. Every ritual demands a sacrifice, Frank. The line between fiction and reality disintegrated. What remained of Harper's bedroom had transformed into a swirling whirl of painted colors, but I saw Amy Andrews clearly. I saw that blue painted tear trickle down her peachy cheek. I saw the blade that she produced from her pocket. The colors had started to mix, but I knew what she did. I tried to scream at the horrifying sight, but my face was composed of a melting and painted liquid. My limbs slowly warped out of shape and I felt nothing. That absence of sensation was the true terror. My eyesight blurred as the vibrant kaleidoscope of colors seemed to bulge and spiral. The painted art gallery grew to fill the room, and my body became sloshy paint on its canvas. And then I fell onto the darkened floor of the real art gallery. Nobody had been watching the paintings for hours, and not that it mattered. After the destruction of Harper's tooth, eyes were powerless against the exactor and its legions. The ritual had been broken. Resolving to fix that, I pulled myself to my feet. The world hadn't ended. There was time, but the gallery's eerie silence horrified me. Not as much as the first thing that I noticed, of course. Empty paintings. Every painting but Harper's Youth Dies had been abandoned by the monstrosities that I was supposed to guard. The girl sat in her painting with her faceless head in her hands. She was sobbing, and I felt like doing the same. Her painted form seemed even more terrifying in the wake of the real Harper's diabolical demise. She mumbled, slipping her head out of her hands and motioning for me to come closer. As I did, as she leaned out of her canvas, I placed my ear against her face, shuddering as it slipped beneath her flesh. "They're destroying the upstairs paintings, but they won't find the apocalypse." Before I could ask what she meant, her canvas flopped out of its frame and softly floated to the tiled floor. My jaw hung agape as I saw the hidden painting in the back of Harper's Youth Dies. It depicted everything, every terrible entity, every apocalyptic situation necessary to keep the demons lost in their false paradise. Clearly, that hidden painting had always been Harper's real plan B. A more efficient way of trapping the creatures. Only one painting to watch, and only one name to etch. Heart throbbing against my chest, I plunged my hand into my mouth. Pinching a canine with my thumb and index finger, I took a deep breath. Closing my eyes, I tugged with all of my might. The pain was excruciating, but what made it worse was that I couldn't seem to free the slippery canine. I needed a tool to loosen the ritualistic tool. I ran over to the reception desk and rummaged around in the drawer for a pair of scissors. Another deep inhale, and then I slammed the blades into... sorry, I can't, it's too horrible. I eventually dislodged the tooth. The blood gushed in a free-flowing waterfall. Hand trembling, I victoriously held the canine up to my eye and began to laugh deliriously. I was inebriated and I'm sure that eased the pain, but it still hurt like crazy. Drunkenly stumbling towards the apocalypse, which lay on the ground, I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And then the front door opened. "Frank?" Kara cried. "Where did you go?" I spun around, shakily outstretching an arm. "Kara, go home." My wife's eyes grew and she screamed at me. "Look out!" A heavy hand constricted my throat, not a human hand. I already knew what had seized me. The weighty wave of hopelessness and existential dread was unmistakable. As the hand hoisted me off the ground, the thing started to twist me around to face it. There, inches from my choking face, was the ghastly face of the exactor. Its wicked white eyes pierced mine, but that wasn't what filled me with horror. Its flesh wasn't sizzling under the weight of my gaze. No tooth, no imprisoning ritual, no power. And that ever-gaping, ever-slack mouth suddenly closed, as if the creature were no longer furious. In its place, the creature offered a smile. The most dreadful smile conceivable. The one I'm sure Amy and Harper saw on their father's face. The grin of a thing that had finally found a way to end mankind. I wheezed, gasping for air as the shirtless creature twice as tall as any human choked me. I had never felt so utterly petrified. I eyeballed the face of a boundless power, a thing older than time itself perhaps. The edges of my vision started to blacken, but I had no tricks up my sleeve. My eyes could no longer imprison it. And then I heard screaming. The exactor dropped me, more concerned with the spectacle in the main reception area. I turned to face my wife and I screeched. Harper's ghoul had seemingly fled its painting, the canvas which still lay on the floor displaying the apocalypse on the reverse side, and I could only watch in helpless horror as the faceless girl merged with Kara's body. The exactor unleashed its boat horn cry and its minions inexplicably seeped through the cracks in the tiles, slinking their slender bodies into the room, morphing their flat forms into full-bodied limbs. I wondered where the cavalry had been hiding, and I suddenly saw why they were so animated. Kara's eyes rolled into the back of her head and her body began to levitate. I screamed in horror, wondering why Harper had turned on me in my darkest hour. But then something incredible happened. "Oh," Kara said. eyes still rolling into the back of her head. Now I see. The exactors began to lurch towards my hovering wife, and I watched in bewilderment as she flicked them aside. The exactor crept across the floor towards her, crunching the meager bodies of its henchmen beneath its feet. Kara and Harper couldn't kill the things, but they weren't trying to kill them. They were trying to buy time for me. I crawled across the floor, breathlessly spluttering from the swollen neck that the exactor had given me. And when I reached the apocalypse, I opened the palm of my clenched hand to reveal my bloody canine. Writing tool in hand, I finally started to etch two crucial words. Frank Hull. Those choral screams sounded again, the symphony of dying people, but it wasn't real. It wasn't real, and that was a good thing. It meant the exactor was trying to get in my head, and it meant the ritual had worked. I looked up to see a gaping mouth of fury on the 10-foot-tall ghoul's face. Its minions began to decompose, turning into blackened masses of paint, much as Harper had described. The creatures slipped into the apocalypse, imprisoned in a painting once more. The exactor held on to our world for dear life, screeching under the weight of my eyes upon it. His flash was a blazing inferno, and he released one final cry of agony before slipping into the painting of the apocalypse. I ran over to my wife, who was lying on the floor in a dazed state. "I just wanted to see your place of work again," she croaked. I cried with laughter, relieved that my wife was okay. "What the heck happened back there?" Kara coughed. "I came to save you." "No, I mean." "Oh, right, the demonic possession. It was still me in there. Harper just showed me the way." "Honestly, I thought you learned your lesson the last time that you strolled in here," I said. Kara smiled weakly. "I had to save you." But the evening's shocks didn't end with the re-imprisonment of the exactor and the other demons. In the early morning hours of my shift, Amy Andrews walked through the door. I gasped, eyeing the bandaged stump that used to be her right arm. I had misinterpreted the severity of the sacrifice she had made, and I think that news saved my fractured mind. I couldn't handle any more death. Amy's family had suffered enough. Amy suffered enough, locked out of her own mind for 20 years. I intend to keep her far away from the exactor, so that he never gets his claws into her again. We've talked about the future of the art gallery, but there's only one painting that really matters anymore. There's only one that's still fully intact: the apocalypse. And well, Harper's youth dies on the reverse side, but that's our little secret. Miss Andrews said that I can keep the job, and she's hired somebody else to watch the place during the day. Somebody that we can trust. Somebody who understands the importance of the art gallery. Kara. I wasn't too happy about my wife being involved, but nobody can be shielded from the apocalypse. No risks can be taken. Too much is at stake. I'm a security guard who works the night shift at an art gallery, and I think I need a raise. Los Angeles is home to almost 118 million parking spaces. Trying to wrap your head around that is almost as difficult as discerning quantum physics, but it's a fact. Of those 118 million, many of them reside in the multi-story parking garages that litter the city, and going both high up into the sky and down into the earth, looking very much like the tunnels of an ant colony. Some are in terrific shape, while others look like they need to have a condemned notice slapped on them. But regardless of their condition, they are an important part of the city's car-centric infrastructure. And for 6 months in the early 2000s, I worked at one of them as a security guard. For reasons I won't say which one, but I came across the job listing while browsing through the classified section of the LA Times, shortly after moving from Barstow. Even to this day, I can still perfectly recall it. Seeking an individual to work security for graveyard shift at parking garage. Experience preferred, but not required. willing to train the right individual. As I was running low on my savings that I had amassed during my high school days, I needed a steady stream of cash pronto, so I called the number and I scheduled an interview. I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous when I met the manager, but to my luck it turned out that I didn't need to be. I got the job the very same day, and after going over my schedule, I was introduced to the man who I would not only be taught the ropes from, but would also be my partner. Ronnie was the kind of man that you could take one look at and know instinctively not to mess with. A hulking man in his early 60s, he was a veteran of the Vietnam War, sporting a large scar that ran down one side of his face, which he simply said came from a close encounter during his time in it. He had spent the last 30 years working security, and he had worked this gig for the last 15. I had been slightly intimidated when I was first introduced to him, as he had stood in front of me, hair styled in a military crew cut. But as soon as the manager had left our sight, he cracked a smile that instantly relaxed me and patted me on the shoulder. "Just follow my lead, kid, and everything will be fine." And for the first 3 or 4 months it had been. The money it paid wasn't exactly jaw-dropping, but it helped pay the rent on the dingbat apartment that I rented soon after getting the job, the bills, and the insurance on the small early 80s Alfa Romeo convertible that I had been given by my uncle before leaving home. I even had a little extra money left over each month to splurge, which, after the measly pay that I had gotten working cashier jobs at drive-thrus, it was heaven to my 23-year-old self. The hours were also perfect for a night owl like me, and each night as Ronnie and I did our rounds, walking back and forth between the underground levels to the roof section, 6 or 7 stories above the street, the man would crack me up, telling jokes as we swapped stories. Eventually, we began to split up, sweeping each level of the closed garage on our own to make sure that nobody was sleeping in the cars and trucks which were parked overnight in the sea of spaces, or hiding in the dark corners where the overhead lights had burned out. Occasionally, we would have to shoo out some less than scrupulous characters, opening the metal shutters and pushing them out, but nothing severe ever happened. And as eerie as the place could seem at times, being so quiet after buzzing during the day, it never really creeped me out. One night, though, it changed. It started a few days into the 5th month of my employment. It wasn't anything that set off any red flags at first. I'd be walking on my own through one of the levels, shining my flashlight around and looking between the lines of cars, when a small shiver would shoot up my spine. It would shoot through me like a bolt of electricity, and I would stop in my tracks, trying to understand what had caused it. The first few occasions, I simply chalked it up to being the weather. It was fall and the temperature was dropping compared to the highs that there had been in the summer. I would simply shake my head and continue on my way. But when I continued to experience it after showing up to work wearing a heavier hoodie or a jacket, it began to take on a truly creepy aura. And worse, as it went on, I began to feel eyes on me. I thought that I was merely going a little bit stir-crazy or something. After all, it didn't happen every single night. And every single time the feeling came over me, and I would turn around to shine the light behind me, the beam would reflect only off the parked cars. The only sounds heard besides the distant wail of sirens and roto-chop of helicopters outside being the steady drip of water from the leaking pipes in the ceiling. At one point, I radioed Ronnie, asking him if he had ever gotten the feeling as well. His words reassured me.
Absolutely, Seth. I freely admit the first few months I was posted here, this place kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, why shouldn't it? When you're one of the only people in such a large structure and nobody else around, it can give off almost the same vibes as a haunted house. Oh, don't worry, it'll go away soon enough.
Happy to know that I wasn't merely being a little baby, I attempted to ignore the feeling every time that I felt it. I was confident that it would pass, as Ronnie had told me. It didn't. If anything, it began to get worse. I would be walking, humming a song softly to myself when the feeling would fall over me. I would stop dead in my tracks, and I swore just for a second that I would hear another set of footsteps echoing in the silence. They always stopped almost as soon as mine did, to the point that I almost half believed that they were merely my own, echoing back at me off the concrete that the parking garages were always made out of, which seemed to reflect and amplify sounds more than anywhere else. But what always unnerved me was that they ceased so abruptly, as if somebody didn't want me to hear them. I began to carry a butterfly knife that I had bought on my shifts. Ronnie had a pistol on his service belt, but it was his own. Management didn't provide any supplies beyond the radio and flashlight, and I didn't exactly have the funds to grab myself a Glock or a Beretta. So I would simply walk with it tight in my free hand, ready to flip it open and defend myself if the need arose. The next thing that happened occurred about a week or so later. I was halfway down the garage, heading for the underground levels when the radio on my belt squawked.
Seth, come in please, over.
I reached down and plucked it off my belt, thumbing the transmit button. Seth here. Ronnie, what's up? Over. Ronnie was a stickler for proper radio etiquette, a trait from his time in the military. The radio crackled again.
I need you to come and join me. There's something I just came across that needs to be reported. Over.
A small wave of concern washed over me. He's never phrased it like that before. Oh great, what happened? Did he find a junkie OD'd in a car? My mind racing with the possibilities, I hit the button and spoke. Roger that. Where are you? Over. He responded almost immediately.
I'm on the top floor. Over.
Walking quickly, I climbed back the way that I had come, always keeping an eye out behind me. The feeling of being watched hadn't come tonight, mercifully, but I was staying on guard regardless. I had begun to wonder if somebody had died here at some point and the place was haunted. I shook my head and kept walking. Knock it off, man, don't wig yourself out. A few minutes later, I reached the top level and jogged across the expansive space. Ronnie was standing near an alcove located in the far corner. The light above it either burned out or smashed. He had to use his flashlight to light up the area. I reached him, panting a little bit as I bent over and put my hands on my knees. After a moment, I stood up straight. What's up, Ronnie? I asked him. In response, he turned and aimed the flashlight into the alcove. For a moment, I couldn't understand what he was showing me. And then it clicked as I saw what the beam had landed on. The door, which opened onto the stairwell, which led down to street level, hung open. It looks like somebody jimmied the lock when our backs were turned, my friend, he said grimly. For some reason, the man's words made it feel as though a vice had closed around my heart. I remembered the feeling of being watched, along with the footsteps I swore that I had heard shadowing me. Whether this was related or not, the sight of the ajar door, which normally stood firmly locked, did not help in the slightest. I looked up at Ronnie, forcing my voice to not betray the emotions that I felt. So, what do we do? He thought for a second and then reached for a Motorola cell phone clipped to his belt. I'm gonna call this in, both to the cops and management, he said. Then we're going to stick together and clear the garage one level at a time. By the time we get to ground level, they should be here. And with that, he turned away, dialing a number into the phone. I listened quietly as I heard him speaking for a few minutes, before ending the call and dialing the police. As he spoke to them, I cast another look at the parked cars, which now almost seemed to resemble panthers in the gloom, crouched and waiting to pounce on anything that wandered too close. Nothing moved in the stillness, but even still, I swear it felt to me like the shadows seemed to grow a little bit darker. Once Ronnie had finished the call, he withdrew his pistol from its holster. He didn't rack around into the chamber, but he did flick off the safety, keeping it loose in his hand and pointing at the floor. Turning to me, he gave a short nod and whispered a single sentence. Stay close to me, you understand? I nodded quickly in return, and together, the two of us began the slow, almost excruciating process of clearing each floor. To say it felt like an eternity as we wound our way through each line of cars. Occasionally, shining our lights into the interiors would be like calling the Challenger disaster a slight mistake. My heart was beating like a tambourine inside my chest, and my breathing came shallow as I strained my ears to hear anything out of place. I gripped the closed butterfly knife tight in my fist, feeling as on edge as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. As we reached the second floor, rounding the ramp and passing a 70s Cadillac into GMC Vendura, the feeling of being stared at suddenly swept through me like I had been hit by a rogue wave. That wasn't what sent a bolt of fear coursing through me though. It was what I swore I had felt as I hurried to match Ronnie's pace. I had sworn that for a split second. I had felt fingertips brushing against the nape of my neck. Letting out an audible gasp of air, I spun around quickly, yanking my flashlight up and in one fluid motion, flipping open my knife, ready to lash out at the first thing that I saw. The world blurred for a moment, but when it regained itself, it was to see that nobody was there. No figure, corporeal or spirit, lurked in the shadows staring into my soul. Even still, I felt the tendrils of fear jamming themselves into my veins, adrenaline coursing along with them. I swung the flashlight back and forth. There was still nobody. Vaguely, I realized that Ronnie's footsteps had halted, and felt more than heard him step back by my side. "What'd you see?" he asked in a deadly serious voice. The tone was one that I had never heard him use before, and even through the situation, I momentarily had a mental image of him dressed in camouflage fatigues, an M16 in his hand as he crept through the jungle. I took a deep breath, and then spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. I swear for a second when we passed those two cars, I pointed to the Cadillac and the van, that I felt somebody directly behind me, but when I turned back, nobody was there. I breathed in a deep lungful of air and then looked at him. His eyes were hard. He held up a hand to me. "Wait here," he instructed, and then tucking his flashlight hand under his gun hand, he raised the pistol and moved forward, crouching slightly to look under the two vehicles. A moment later, he rounded the side of the van and disappeared from sight. The moments that ticked by felt like hours as I waited for him to reappear. Even though it was irrational, I was suddenly overcome with the certainty that he wouldn't be coming back. That if anyone or anything came back around the corner, it wouldn't be him. My heart began to race inside my chest again. Thankfully, and to my great relief, he reappeared a moment later, looking almost as relieved as I felt. He shook his head at me as he stepped back next to me. "Nobody's there, Seth." He jerked his head in the direction that we had been heading. "Come on, let's keep going. The police will be here any minute, if they're not already." The rest of the trek down was uneventful, something that I thanked the good Lord for a million times over. Ronnie had been correct as well. When we rounded the corner to the metal shutters, it was to see a Chevy Capri patrol car parked in front of them, the headlights and spotlight aimed inside. Two patrolmen stood nearby and Ronnie quickly holstered his pistol as they aimed their lights at us. "You guys the security guards who called?" One asked, a small air of suspicion in his voice. "Yeah, that's right," Ronnie answered, jogging to the keypad and punching in the code to raise them before continuing. The stairwell door at the top had been pried open. My partner and I, he gestured towards me, cleared the levels down to here, but we didn't check out the underground ones. The officer nodded, and then motioned to his partner who climbed back into the cruiser. "Wait here while my partner and I do a sweep," he ordered. After closing the shutters behind them, the two of us stood near the entrance booth for them to return. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke, and then I glanced over at him. To my surprise, I saw a look on his face that I never had before. There was a mix of trepidation, concern, and was that an inkling of fear? In the time that I had known the man, with the sole exception of the few times he had spoken about the horrors that he had seen during the war, nothing had rattled him. And seeing him in such a state, to put it lightly, unsettled me. Something was worming its way through my mind, something I wanted to ask him. I hesitated a moment before opening my mouth. You felt it too, haven't you, Ronnie? You felt exactly what I have, the sensation that we're not alone in here, the sounds of footsteps behind you. He didn't reply for a while and then turned to me, the usual stoic bravado plastered there once more. He shook his head at me, his voice firm. No, I haven't, Seth. Like I told you at the beginning, any feeling not counting tonight, as that's a different story, will fade in time. It's just because of how eerie such a place like a mall or a parking garage feels when it's empty and devoid of people. It's like being the only one left after the apocalypse. He put a hand on my shoulder, giving me the same look my father used to when telling me the facts of life. Don't lose your wits, kid. That's what leads to you getting hurt. Listen to your gut, yes, but don't forget to use your head. And above all, don't let your imagination get the best of you. And with that, he turned to watch for the cops again. The cruiser rounded the bend a few minutes later, the police exiting to inform us that nobody had been found. They left us a case number for the manager to call in the morning, and then reminding us to call if we noticed anything else out of the ordinary before leaving. As I watched the taillights of the cruiser disappear, the shutters again descending to block the way out, a voice suddenly came from over my shoulder. Behind you. For a moment, I felt my heart somersault in my chest and I swiveled around. But I let out a breath I hadn't realized that I had been holding when I saw Ronnie's grin staring back at me. I let out an astonished laugh before reaching out and shoving him. You're seriously a dick, you know that, man. I growled, but failing to stop the grin that spread over my own face. He let out a laugh of his own. You know, it's funny. When Jane Mansfield came to visit us in the barracks and infirmary, and I told her one of my jokes, she told me the exact same thing. For whatever reason, that made me burst into laughter, which he matched. We stood there for a moment, our laughs echoing away into the immense structure, and then the two of us began our walk back up to the top level. Thankfully, nothing more happened that night, and the feeling that I had had didn't return either. The next few weeks went by uneventfully. Normality resumed and the slight impulse that I had to quit melted away. The manager was impressed with our work, and after a good word put in for me by Ronnie, I received a nice raise, one which meant my savings account got a nice boost in its contents. I made a few new friends and even got myself a girlfriend after bumping into a beautiful blonde, my biggest weakness, at the Whiskey A Go-Go during one of my nights off. The world seemed to be my oyster, and I felt like I was on the top of the world. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Until that night. I had ended up a little late for my shift due to, well, that sorts of things that men and their girlfriends get up to when home alone. And after giving Jerry a key to lock up the apartment when she left, I called Ronnie on my landline, leaving him a message on his cell to apologize for being late and letting him know that I was on my way. And I flew out the door and practically leapt into my Alpha. Despite feeling a little guilty that I had for the first time since getting the job left my partner hanging, I still couldn't help but grin as I sped along the city streets, mine still a little behind me in bed with Jerry. As I came within a few blocks of the garage, I reached into my center console and pulled out a cassette tape, sliding it into the car stereo and hitting play. The drum beat and synthesizers of Michael Cimbello's Maniac began blasting out of the speakers, and with the convertible top down, it added a sense of adventure and urgency to the drive. I allowed my foot to press a little harder down on the accelerator, the roar of the car's engine mixing with the music and wind. The front of the garage came into view as I rounded the final corner, and I pressed on a button which I had affixed at the top of the windshield. It controlled the shutters and allowed Ronnie and I to get into the garage without leaving our cars. Seeing it was raised enough to get inside without slowing, I admittedly was a bit of an idiot and took the corner a little bit too hard, the rear end of the Alpha fishtailing as I flew under the shutters and into the garage. I slowed just enough to hit the button again and then began my ascent to the top level. It was a routine for me by now to park at the top and begin my sweep by heading straight down to the underground levels and work my way back up. I drove up each ramp a little bit too fast, flying down each aisle of cars, the music and the roar of the engine echoing like machine gun fire in the enclosed space and drowning anything else out. Finally, I reached the top, and with a final yank on the parking brake, I slid with a screech of tires into an empty space. Shutting off the engine, I pulled the top up and fastened it before climbing out of the car. My ears rang slightly in the sudden silence that rushed in to take the maelstrom of noise that I had caused, and I stared around, looking to see if I could find Ronnie doing his rounds. He had surely had to have heard me enter. Seeing nothing, I shrugged my shoulders and slammed the door shut. The loud, metallic slam of steel echoed like a gunshot in the silence. I locked the door, and after retrieving my radio and flashlight from the trunk, I turned it on and pressed down on the transmit button. "Hey Ronnie, this is Seth. Come in, buddy. Over." I stood there for a few moments, waiting for a reply, but none came. I felt a small knot of worry begin tying itself in my stomach. I seriously hope I didn't piss the dude off, not after all he's done for me. I pressed down on the button again. "Hey Ronnie, I'm sorry that I came a little bit late. I lost track of time. I hope you can forgive me." I took a breath before finishing. "I'm gonna get started on my rounds, okay? Over." Almost as soon as I let go of the button, the radio began to crackle, signaling somebody had begun transmitting on their end of the radio. Several sharp crackles of static emanated from the speaker, and then I heard Ronnie's voice answer me, sounding muffled in the wave of static.
"Copy that."
As soon as the second word had left his lips, the radio went silent again. I stared at the radio for a moment and then clipped it to my belt, sighing heavily. Yeah, good going. The man clearly was pissed at me, as he only spoke curtly when he was in a bad mood. I resolved when I came across him that I would apologize properly, and stress to him that I would never be late again. For now though, let's just get to work. The trek down to the underground levels was uneventful. I saw nobody and had no eerie feelings as I flashed my light into a few cars, peering between them and loudly humming Maniac. That song was firmly stuck in my head and would likely stay there for the rest of the night. To my surprise, however, I didn't see hide or hair of Ronnie. I had felt for sure that I would bump into him heading up to the top on my way down, but I hadn't so much as heard his footsteps. The man's probably heading up the ramps on the opposite side of the garage to keep distance from me, I thought. The notion made another wall of shame and sadness wash over me, and I felt like a grade A prick for screwing up. As I headed down into the two underground levels, I hoped against hope that for whatever reason, the radio would crackle with the promise of a message coming through it. And to my great relief, as I finished my rounds of the underground, it did.
"Seth, come in please. Over."
The static caused by the concrete almost drowned out his voice, but it was still unmistakable. Smiling slightly, I pulled the radio from my belt. "Seth here. I'm honestly happy to hear from you. As dumb as that might sound, man. What's up? Over." There was a few seconds of silence, and then the radio crackled again.
"I need you to come and join me. Over."
I began to head for the ramp back up to the ground level, thumbing the radio again. "Roger that, Ronnie. Everything all good. Over." Another few seconds of silence, and then,
"I need you to come and join me. Over."
I stopped walking for a second, lifting the radio and staring at it as my brow furrowed. Okay, that was weird. He's not usually one to repeat himself. He usually explains the situation. Suddenly a thought occurred to me and I groaned. Oh God, don't tell me somebody pried open one of those doors again. I hit the transmit button yet again, speaking professionally. Roger that, I'm on my way. Where are you at? Over. After a second, he answered.
Top floor.
For a split second, something nagged at my mind and then I pushed it away, replying to him a final time before hurrying up. Copy that, on my way, over. I hustled up the levels in silence for the next few minutes. The only sounds I could hear aside from the ones filtering in from the city outside being my own labored breathing. By the time I reached the top, my lungs felt like they were on fire. Okay, it's official. I need to get my butt back in the gym on the regular. Being this out of shape from a simple jog up 6 stories is not how the former captain of the swim team should be. Chuckling slightly, I slowed to a walk, pulling out my flashlight and flicking it on. I saw no sign of Ronnie. Remembering my idea about the door, I headed for the far corner, which as usual was covered in gloom. However, I felt another pang of surprise as I saw no sign of him over there either. What's going on? He specifically asked me to come to the top level. Where is he? I pulled the radio from my belt and thumbed it. Ronnie, come in please, man. I'm on the top floor, but I don't see you. Where are you? Over. As I released the transmit button, I was only greeted by static. I stood there for a few seconds, remembering the delay in his responses previously. When almost a minute had passed by without a response, I tried raising him again. Ronnie, this is Seth. I'm at the top where you asked me to join you, but unless I ended up in an alternate reality, you're not up here. Care to tell me where you're at? Over. I waited again, another minute or two passing. I shot a look around, aiming my light slightly to see if he was making his way through the aisles of cars, but there was no movement in the stillness. A slight sense of irritation began to bubble up inside me as a thought suddenly occurred to me. Oh, this better not be a sort of punishment for being late. I know he's peeved, but this is seriously taking it too far. Feeling a heat of anger sweep through me, I stabbed the transmit button harder than I should, my voice coming out harsher than I anticipated. Okay, man, I'm seriously starting to get pissed off here. I'm sorry that I was late, but we don't have to be childish about this, okay? Now do me a favor and tell me where you're at. Over. For a few seconds, there was nothing, and then another wave of static came through, followed by 2 words.
Behind you.
My face scrunched up at the 2 words. What is that supposed to mean? I just looked behind me and nobody's there. I hit the transmit button, beginning to speak. Okay, you want to clarify what the... But my voice cut off, as that same nagging thought swam forward in my mind. Only now I let it come to the forefront as the thing that I had found odd clearly presented itself to me. He didn't say over. Slowly, I raised the radio in my hand, staring at it as though it would provide me with the answers that my mind so clearly was searching for. Another puzzle piece connected. Ronnie's military training would never allow him to finish a radio transmission without the correct lingo. He even told you as such the first day that you met. I whispered out in the gloom, "What is going on?" And then a sound began behind me. It was soft at first, like a lover guiding their partner to the bedroom, but it slowly rose in volume and intensity as these seconds clicked by. I listened hard, attempting to pin down which direction it was coming from, but it almost seemed like a futile effort. The sound kept growing louder, almost as if it were getting closer to me, and as it rose a little bit louder, I suddenly realized what it was. Humming. It was the sound of someone humming in the gloom. I twisted around, shining my light but still unable to see where it was coming from. The sound echoed off the walls, making it seem like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. As I listened harder, I suddenly realized two things in quick succession. The song that was being hummed. It was the very song that I had been listening to as I drove up in my car. The second was what caused a familiar yet extremely unwanted shiver to shoot up my spine. It wasn't Ronnie. I had heard the man hum before. He had always sounded extremely low-pitched, like a bear growling. This sounded higher-pitched, yet still clearly a man. Another shiver shot through me as I suddenly became aware of another noise echoing off the walls. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps, ones that sounded like somebody wearing heavy work boots, were rapidly approaching from somewhere off in the gloom. Another huge shiver shot up my spine, and my heart began to beat rapidly in my chest. Normally, I'm someone who isn't afraid of confrontation. I've had my fair share of scrapes in my life. This time, however, between the creepy humming that was clearly not my partner, the rapidly approaching footsteps, and the strange responses that I had received over the radio from Ronnie, every instinct in my body was telling me that confronting whoever this person was, even with the knife in my pocket, would be a mistake that I might not live to regret. And so, remembering Ronnie's words about trusting my instincts and gut, I clicked the flashlight off and allowed myself to melt into the shadows. The footsteps approached quicker, the man still humming maniac as I slipped in between two cars, moving rapidly for the small space between the front bumpers in concrete, flattening myself out as much as possible. I slid against the front bumper of an Explorer and held my breath. The footsteps and humming got louder until I began to hear my ears ringing from the sound. I realized that I could finally pinpoint the sound. The footsteps were almost directly on the opposite end of the SUV. My heart thundered in my chest, and despite my attempts to stay calm, I couldn't help but feel fear sweep through me. The footsteps stopped for a moment and the humming continued. The man began to loudly hum the chorus, almost as if it were a sort of taunt. I began to do something that I hadn't in years. I began to pray. Please just keep going. Don't stop or come back here. Keep going. For what felt like an eternity, the humming continued opposite me. And then mercifully the footsteps began again, now heading away in the direction of the stairwell door. Trying to stay as quiet as possible, I fought to think of a plan. If I could only make it to my car, I could race down to the ground level and get out of here, find a payphone and call the cops. Whoever this guy is, he's giving off psychopath vibes, and whether Ronnie is okay or not, I can't help him if he catches me. But God, my car is in the direction that he went. If I try and get to it, I run the risk of running straight into him. So what do? I raced through the options, but only one kept presenting itself to me. I would have to, without being spotted, creep down to the ground level and manually enter the code to raise the shutters. And then I would have to race away like my life depended on it, which in this case it felt like it did. I could still faintly hear the humming and footsteps as they kept retreating in the opposite direction. The prospect of making it down 6 levels with this nutcase wandering around was not appealing in the slightest, but I had no choice. Taking a quiet and deep breath, I began to move. I crept slowly but steadily, using each car as cover. I didn't move too quickly as I didn't want to make too much noise, but I didn't allow myself to falter. I kept moving, making it to the first ramp. Taking a huge breath and staying crouched, I dashed down the looping circle to the floor below. I stopped by a car to catch my breath momentarily and I listened. I thought I could just about hear the sound of humming coming from somewhere above me. Feeling confident that I had made it down unseen, I kept going. I repeated the same process, reaching the last row of cars and eyeing the ramp down to the 4th level. I prepared myself to make another dash. And that's when the radio on my belt, which I had completely forgotten about, crackled to life. I froze like a statue for a split second, and then I felt my blood turn to ice in my veins as a sound began spilling from the speakers. This time, though, it was not Ronnie's voice. It was the sound of the man humming, the tone now containing a malicious glee in it. With a sudden, horrific realization, I understood what he was doing. My hands flew to my belt and I tore at the radio's volume controls. I snapped it off and then held my breath, listening as hard as I could. I prayed that I had been far enough away that he hadn't pinpointed my location. The sound of rapidly approaching footsteps from just above my head told me that my prayers had not been heard. Oh crap. Trying to stay as quiet as before, I made a mad dash for the ramp. As I reached it, I risked a glance behind me. This level of the parking garage, almost all of the lights had burned out, but there was enough coming in from outside that I clearly saw the outline of a figure standing at the base of the ramp on the opposite end. The sight caused a tremendous bolt of fear to shoot through me. I didn't allow myself to stare any longer. I just crouched ran down the ramp, keeping my gaze on the ground in front of me. Mercifully, I reached the 4th level safely. Moving on the balls of my feet, I slid in amongst the next row of cars as I heard the footsteps slowly sound from above me, before going silent. I waited to hear if I could hear them begin again, and then slowly began to move among the cars. I was halfway down the row when I stopped for a moment to catch my breath, confident that I hadn't been pursued down to this level yet. I reached out and put my hand against the bumper of the nearest car to steady myself, and I froze. My eyes widened and I slowly turned my head at the sensation that I had felt. When I had reached out and put my hand against the bumper, I expected it to feel the cool sensation of metal, but instead I had felt something sticky and warm. I looked at what car I had leaned against. Vaguely, I became aware that I was crouching behind the same panel van that I had sworn I had felt the sensation of fingers brush against me as I had passed. It had been reversed into the parking space. I could see the GMC logo glinting in the overhead lights. I saw the white paint peeling in places. And then my eyes lowered to the bottom of the rear doors. I had to clamp my mouth shut to keep from screaming. This level was still rather gloomy, but there were still enough lights to see something that was leaking out from beneath the bottom of the rear doors, dripping down onto the metal bumper and down onto the concrete, forming a small pool. A pool that was the same color that stained the palm of my hand. Crimson. My breathing began to come in short, ragged gasps as I stared at the blood on my hand. And then my heart almost stopped as a sound came from somewhere behind me, yet clearly on the same level as me. The sound of chuckling. I began to shake with fear, realizing that whoever the psycho was and whatever he had done with my partner, oh, you know exactly what he did with Ronnie, my mind whispered. He had made it soundlessly down to the same level. I fought to get my breathing under control and trying to stay silent. I began to move forward again. I slid around a Mercedes into BMW, peering around the bumper of a truck to make sure that he hadn't gotten ahead of me. And that's when something came flying through the air, crashing to the ground almost directly in front of me. I froze like a statue, mind attempting to process what had just happened, and then I looked down at the object. What I saw made all the terror and horror sweeping through my system climax. Ronnie's radio, shattered against the concrete and smeared with blood. The sudden, horrific conclusion came flying forward in my mind, one which was worse than any other. He threw it exactly where you are. He knows exactly where you are. As it slammed into me like a truck, another equally terrifying sensation came over me. The sensation of eyes boring into the back of my skull. Slowly, almost unwillingly, I turned to look behind me, and my eyes went wide. Crouched only a few cars behind me was the outline of a tall man. Through the tinted windows, I couldn't make out any details, only the figure. one who was clearly crouching and staring through the glass on the other side, directly at me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It burst out of me. I opened my mouth and screamed to sound more horrified than I had ever heard come from within me, or have since. I lost my composure then and there. I leapt from my hiding spot and began sprinting away, running into the middle of the aisle. Behind me, I heard another of those sickening chuckles, now filled with the same tone as a teenager who successfully pranked their best friend. Only this was more evil than I had ever heard in my life. I honestly don't know if he followed me all the way down to the gate or if he simply remained where he had been, reveling in the terror that he had filled me with. I don't know why he simply toyed with me and didn't kill me. All I know is I somehow made it to the keypad, stabbing the code and then dashing for the shutter as it raised, crawling under it and racing into the street. Almost like Providence, a patrol car had been cruising past when I ran out. I can only imagine how I must have looked to them as I flagged them down, one hand covered in blood and scared out of my mind. But I can only guess they understood enough because they radioed in for backup immediately. That horrifying night was over 20 years ago. The police searched that parking garage top to bottom trying to find any trace of the man. But to my despair, I was later told that they found the same door that had been pried open before, standing open on the top floor. And with no cameras in the garage, there was no way to identify him. They did find Ronnie, however. That blood that I had slid my hand into against the van, well, it had been his. The grim-looking detective told me that later when I gave my statement. He refused to tell me exactly what had been done to him, though, and for that, I think in hindsight that I'm grateful. When I think back to the look on his face, I can only imagine, and that's horrifying enough. They also informed me how I had heard Ronnie's voice through the radio. They had found a tape recorder near the van. They suspected that he had been listening into mine and Ronnie's transmissions through a CB that was inside the van and recorded them, playing them back to lure me to the top floor. The one thing that still makes me shudder, however, is trying to figure out how he recorded him saying, "Behind you," to me. Needless to say, I quit working as a security guard. After recovering, I eventually went to bartending school and began working the bars across the city, including the Whiskey A Go-Go where I had met Jerry. She and I ended up marrying in 2009 and we ended up having a baby boy, one I named in honor of my partner and friend. I can't say that I'm fully back to normal. I don't think anybody ever could be after such an experience. I still have nightmares about it and I feel consumed with guilt for not having gotten to work on time that night, and filled with horror at what might have happened to me if I had. And I certainly stay far away from parking garages, but I can say I'm at least doing the best I can. I guess the reason I decided to share it after all this time is twofold. First, I guess just to share it at all, especially since it barely got any mentions in the papers. Not long after it happened, the papers flooded with the news of the BTK killer being captured. All poor Ronnie got was a small obituary in the paper. After all, in LA, one person being killed is just another Tuesday, as messed up as that is. And secondly, because I want to give some advice to those who read mine and others' terrifying experiences which are posted here. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're faced with a terrifying, heart-stopping situation, take the advice that I was given by Ronnie. Don't lose your wits. That's what leads to you getting hurt. Listen to your gut, yes, but don't forget to use your head. It may be advice that saves your life one day. There's a level of anxiety that comes with starting a new job that I just hate. Not sure if it's just the process of learning what to do, the pressure of proving myself to new coworkers, or just the stress of being in a new environment. But it's been a constant across every job I've ever taken. This newest one piled that anxiety onto the max though, and I don't think I'll be going back after what happened last night. To be perfectly clear, if I end up hitting send on this and you're reading it right now, well, it's not really up to me if I go back to work or not. They're probably going to ship me off to some black site that's further off the map than my current position. 1 week here and I've learned all those conspiracy theories that Americans have about Area 51 barely begin to scratch the surface, so I might as well go for broke and tell the whole story, right? I've been in the Air Force for about 5 years now, and this was supposed to be my latest post. Something that my commanding officers said was a breeze, which I honestly had doubts about considering I'd been in Germany for the last 2 years and it was, for lack of a better description, the easiest stuff that I've ever done. They said it would be just as easy, except I would get to be back on home turf in the desert of Nevada. Guard duty isn't that hard anyway, right? Assuming that you're guarding humans. My first day started out like any other that I've had. Get to the base, find the CO there, and get my orders directly from them. They assigned me to this older officer as my trainer, Mills, and he started leading me through the main building towards our post. According to him, all that we had to do was keep an eye on the security cameras for the entire place and notify higher-ups if anything looked out of place. The base itself was, well, what you would expect from a base in the middle of the desert. A few big, nondescript buildings surrounded by fences with a healthy amount of razor wire. I honestly wasn't expecting much when I got in, but imagine my surprise when Mills told me to hop into a golf cart so that we could get to the monitor room. I mean, I always figured there was more to Area 51 than what we could see from the outside. But when we drove at least 4 miles through this huge tunnel on a pretty steep incline, he was talking to me the whole time, asking me if I had found a place to live nearby yet, and telling me about staying away from the Vegas Strip on my days off. It seemed like we were driving for hours though, my stomach getting more and more uneasy with every passing foot, when we finally stopped in front of a small door built into the side of the tunnel. Hey, you're lucky, kid. This has to be the cushiest job in the entire US military. We just watch these screens and give a little check-in every other hour. Sometimes they'll have us do rounds and check out doors. Otherwise, I just sit here and work on my Sudoku puzzles for as long as I want while getting top dollar for it, he said to me when we entered. The room was surprisingly big, with almost the 2 entire walls filled floor to ceiling with monitors that we were supposed to keep track of. Some showed empty gray rooms with nothing but abandoned desks. Others were static shots of desert sand. Another with the exterior of the buildings that we entered through. And then one in the upper right-hand corner caught my eye. What in the world is that? I asked, pointing to the screen in question. Mills gave a chuckle, pulling up a chair at the small desk and grabbing the nearby mouse. With a few clicks, he enlarged the image for me to see better. In the middle of a small all-white room sat a table. On that table was one small body, and at first I honestly thought that it was a kid. Maybe the kid of a superior officer having a nap or something while their dad was working. I don't know. But then when Mills made the picture bigger, I noticed the odd proportions of it. A massive head, long arms and legs with a small torso that seemed barely strong enough to hold up the rest of it. The gray, flushed skin was nearly a pale white that looked sickly against the walls of the room. "You're kidding me, right?" I asked, looking back at Mills. He smiled, shaking his head and putting the screen back on multi-view. "Nope. Welcome to orientation day, kid. That there is an original," he said, taking his seat and pulling out a massive thermos before beginning to pour the contents into a mug. "What did they tell you when you were assigned here?" "Nothing, pretty much," I said, mind swirling. There was no way that he had just confirmed the existence of aliens so casually. It was like showing me an animal in a zoo exhibit for him. All he was doing was smiling, watching as I tried to reconcile what I was seeing on the screen, scanning through different views from the cameras. I began to notice even more odd sights. A massive disc and one that had tons of tech set up all around it. A mechanic using an arc welder on one side. Another view showed something in another room. It looked like a concentrated ball of darkness, the occasional tendril reaching outward towards the door, before a light would come on causing it to snap back into place. Then another room with one lone person sitting in a chair, dressed like your everyday civilian with just a weird grin on his face. All of it looked so out of place to the regular human, but Mills was smiling at me like it was just another day. So what is all this? Well, what have you heard about Roswell 1947? He shot back at me, and I shrugged as he continued. Doppelgangers, dark matter, all kinds of weird stuff out there that the regular Joe doesn't get to know about. Come on, you want some coffee? So you mean all the little green men cartoons and stuff like that? They're all real. Like not even an exaggeration or change to how they look. I sat next to him, taking the mug of coffee that he offered and sipping it slow. It burned a little, but that burn was helping to distract me from the crisis going on in my head at the moment. Best way to hide something is to do it in plain sight, he retorted. And they're not green as you can see. More of a gray pallor, though they look a lot like a corpse in most lighting. That one there is perfectly healthy though, as far as we can tell. How can you tell? It looks dead. Well, we don't have anything that can pierce its skin. And of course, vitals aren't going to be the same as what we measure for ourselves. But they have picked up brainwaves, from as far as 60 feet away even. That's why that room has lead walls 3 feet thick. That thing will start talking into your brain if you're close enough. He muttered, his face flickering for a moment from being playful to a look of horror. Telepathy? I asked. He only nods. Some crazy Professor X stuff if I've ever seen it. I went through it myself on one of my first guard duties here. They didn't have the walls thick enough yet, and when I passed by on rounds, it started screaming in my head. I nearly choked on the hot coffee, earning myself a coughing fit in the process. What did it say? It begged me to let it go. And then when it realized that I couldn't do that, it started begging me to kill it. It hasn't moved from that table in almost 80 years it's been here, so I think it's paralyzed or something, totally unable to move. Probably happened in the crash. Was like it was reading my mind though, because I barely got the thought out and it was screaming curses at me for letting it live. Yeah, like I had a choice. Uncle Sam would have me erased from existence if I did that. He looked around the monitors. Can't say I blame it for asking though. Must be a heck of an existence just to be stuck there like that. I just couldn't compute what was happening. Somewhere in my brain was a voice going, well, of course aliens exist, while a whole other section was telling me that this makes everything that I've ever known a total lie. Why did I even get picked for this post? I'm nothing remarkable. I haven't done anything bad to piss off superiors. So why would they put me here and shatter my entire worldview? Did somebody really just hate me? Or was I just another faceless rank that they tossed on the job? Just don't let it get to you too bad, alright? Mills said, a genuine concern on his face now. Hey, I know it's a lot to take in, but trust me, it gets normal after a while. Just don't think too hard on any of it. The rest of the day was spent watching monitors and doing rounds. Between our patrols, that Mills clued me in on the gas that were kept around here. The gray was obviously the big deal, but the other things on screen were a whole other ballgame of weird. The disc thing was the ship the gray arrived in. Not too big of a surprise there. Mills said that they haven't been able to crack the thing since the crash though. There's no door in and no visible way out, and nothing we have can get through the hull. Though the guy with the arc welder gave it his best for about 3 hours before finally calling it quits. Dark matter was what he called the massive darkness in the lighted room. Said he wasn't sure where the heck they found it, but anything that went into the dark never came out. There were at least 10 high-powered UV lamps in that room that acted as a deterrent, and apparently it could assimilate any sort of shadow or darkness, potentially using it to escape. By far the creepiest one, though, was the doppelganger. Mills had mentioned to me that it had breached containment once before, able to nearly perfectly imitate any human that it wants. About brought the entire place down and killed 5 guards before they got it back into a cell. It just sat there, totally rigid, upright, smiling huge with pointed and human teeth that gave away that it wasn't one of us. The thing gave me a shiver every time the rotating cameras passed back over it. I went home that night unable to sleep. I know it seems cliche, but finding out that we aren't alone in this universe is terrifying. Like ruin your entire worldview level stuff. I was raised a Baptist, and even though I didn't hold to it, I started to question if God was even real. And if he was, why would he make anything like what was being kept in Area 51? That was 4 days ago. The next 2 days were uneventful for the most part. Some conspiracy theorists were trying to climb one of the fences near the upper base, but here underground in the lower base, nobody knew that we were there. Mills about drove me out of my mind with small talk. The guy is nice and everything, but when you're looking at aliens and deadly mimics on security cameras, it seems kind of trivial to discuss your favorite food or what was on television the night before. Last night, though, everything changed. I got in for my first solo guard duty. Guess 3 days of training was expected to be enough time to acclimate myself to the horrors of the universe Uncle Sam was hiding deep below the Nevada desert. Wish I had called out, if we're being honest. Around 9:30, not long after the last rays of sunlight had finally faded over the horizon, I went on my first patrol of the night. Through the long tunnel down to the cells area, a long hallway each holding cells about 30 feet apart with most of that space filled with solid concrete between rooms. There were other guards on duty, of course. Each cell had 2 men posted outside, ready in case anything might make a break for it. From the cells, it was back upstairs to upper base and R&D where they were trying to crack the disc once again, this time with a massive laser setup that looked like it could do some gnarly damage if aimed elsewhere. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. When I got back to the monitor room, it was around 10:30. And going through the cameras, and nothing was really out of the ordinary. The dark matter had the UV lights all the way up, a normal precaution during the night hours. Why, when we were over 100 feet below ground, is beyond my pay grade. It's not like sunlight is reaching down here to help during the day. The doppelganger was sitting and staring into the corner. I didn't stay on the camera for too long because it made me shiver involuntarily. It was like no matter if it was facing you or not, it could always see you. I swear that it was watching me more than I was watching it, and there was no way that it could see me. Eventually, I hit the outer cameras. These things were all over the surface, disguised as cactuses, shrubbery, random rocks. Whatever could hide a camera had one in it, covering every possible inch of the surface above the real base. It was camera 46 that stood out tonight, though. I don't know if I would have noticed it if it weren't a clear night. Every star in the sky was visible through the cams, shining bright to show the entire desert. Except right up in the top left side of the camera's view. There the stars were blinking and moving ever so slightly, wavering from side to side like something was swinging them around for its own amusement. As I stared, it began to affect more of the stars nearby, nearly engulfing everything in view before finally settling in. As I looked closer, reaching for my radio to call one of the surface guards, something flashed. Every camera went out along with the lights. The base shut down completely for a moment, darkness taking over as whatever flashed outside cut off the electricity. Before I could even reach for a flashlight, it was back on though. My face was mirrored on the black screen, a look of fear in my eyes. I booted everything back up, looking close as it took its sweet time, desperate to bring camera 46 back up so that I could see what was going on. My worried expression stared back at me as alarms began going off across the base.
Attention, lockdown protocols are now active. Please stay at your post and report any strange occurrences. Lockdown protocols are now active. Do not under any circumstances open the cell doors.
The screen came back on, but it wasn't on camera 46. Instead, there was my own face still staring back at me, but this time in full HD color. Rows of sharp teeth and a huge grin smiling right at me. I nearly fell back out of my chair when I realized that the doppelganger was staring straight into the camera and taunting me. I don't know how it had taken my face, whether it could just sense me there through the camera or it just did it randomly, but it freaked me out.
Wash, what are you doing in there, man?
The radio started cackling. I could barely hear it through my own racing heartbeat. One of these superior officers on the base calling for me to check in. Meanwhile, the doppelganger was still just staring at me over the screen, daring me to make some kind of move or come after it. My hand shaky and reaching for the radio, I pushed the button down to talk back. "Yes, sir, I'm here." My voice sounded distant, frail. The smile on the doppelganger seemed to get bigger as my fear grew.
What happened out there? Did you see anything on the surveillance?
He shot back. There was something in the sky like it was shimmering. Then a flash and everything went out. I stammered back.
Oh, son of a... They're back.
He was shouting now. Who's back? Good God, you would think if there was some history of attacks on this place, they would have clued me in so I could keep an eye out.
The Greys,
he replied. And that was when a huge explosion sent a tremor through the building. Switching through the cameras back to the one above ground, I could see that the sky wasn't empty anymore. There were at least 3 discs, just like the one being kept down here in R&D, hovering in the sky. One fired off a thin beam of light towards the ground, causing another tremor to rock the base. Lights flickered but didn't quite go out this time.
I need somebody with eyes outside to answer me. What is happening?
Another voice came over the radio.
Multiple hostiles spotted over lower and upper bases. We're under attack.
Somebody else answered. Clicking through the screens, even more of the discs were visible over the above-ground base, already firing off shots at the building up there and sending them up in flames. It took everything in me not to just sit in the corner and cower, desperate to believe that this was just a bad dream.
We've got worse problems. The dark matter escaped when the power went out. It's not looking good,
he said. Should I run? I was trying to come up with any kind of plan to get out of here, forget my job. The only means of escape that I knew was through the tunnel back up to the upper base though. Even if I had managed to escape up there, there's still the problem of these flying saucers that would probably evaporate me on sight. Maybe my best hope was to just stay down here out of sight and out of mind, and wait for everything to calm down before I escape.
Ah!
Another voice over the radio screaming out in pain.
Help! Send reinforcements to upper base. They're coming in.
I flipped the cameras over, watching as the discs let out an even larger beam of light. On the ground where they shone, more of the aliens suddenly began to appear. They looked just like the one laying on the table down the hallway, but far more dangerous. A soldier moved towards them, raising his gun and firing off a couple of rounds at one of the aliens' massive heads. The bullet stopped in front of it like the Matrix, hovering in midair for a moment before falling harmlessly to the ground below. The Grey didn't take that particularly well. Honestly, I can't say that I would blame it. Getting shot at is never something that you just shrug off. But it simply looked at the soldier, barely even moving its head. What I saw next was something that no horror movie or years of watching Live Leak could have prepared me for. Something picked the shooter up, raising him into the air with invisible hands. He struggled against it, begging it to let him go. Before anybody else could step up to help, though, he began folding in on himself. I could hear the bones cracking over the cameras, thank God, but I could vaguely hear his screams of pain as they were caught by the small microphone. He kept folding smaller and smaller until he was barely the size of a baseball, compressed into an orb of flesh and pulverized bone, dripping blood as it hovered there over the ground. Oh my God, I muttered as the graze simply moved its head slightly, sending the flesh ball flying through the stomach of another soldier that was approaching. It went straight through the poor guy, making a huge hole as it blew chunks of intestines and bone through his back. The gray continued on, unimpeded as it simply crushed anyone that got in its way. I could only watch in terror as it walked calmly through a dozen men, taking them all out without even lifting a finger. More began to beam down to the surface, following it toward its goal and joining the march.
Fall back. Air support is inbound.
The radio crackled to life once more. On one of the big monitors, I could see a jet take off from one of the nearby runways, already beginning to veer back around so that it could fire a shot at the discs floating nearby. 2 choppers took off around the same time, taking their own positions close by. Before I knew it, the plane and choppers all fired off their shots, aiming for the cluster of discs. A bright flash of light came from the disc closest to the ground, causing munitions to explode in midair before they could even touch the alien vessels. A smaller laser erupted from it next, quickly spinning around the edge of the disc. As it passed through the choppers and plane in a clean arc, they split, flames engulfing them from the subsequent explosion. It was pure chaos outside. Nothing that we had could possibly stand up to these things. There was no other choice but to run. Except I couldn't. The Greys would be coming through the tunnel and that was my only way out. The other way was the cells, and after hearing about the darkness escaping, I don't think it was worth the risk. All I could do was wait. There's no point risking a direct run-in unless I wanted to die horribly. No, it was time to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass. I got up, closed the door and locked it, and tried to move what spare furniture that I had in front to block it off further. If anything got in here, I only had my handgun on me, and God knows that was like hunting a bear with a water gun. Nope, I gotta play this smart and avoid any kind of confrontation. If only it was that easy. I kept my eyes on the monitors after that, tracing movements of the Greys while keeping an eye on the lower cells. They were, well, the dark matter obviously wasn't in its cell anymore. The lights were on, but they were simply illuminating the bright white room now. Where the darkness had managed to go, I'm not really sure. There were a dozen guards stationed at each end of the cell block though, each shining a UV light around, trying to illuminate any shadowy corners where it could have been hiding. Another explosion made the ground under my feet tremble. The Greys had broken through the tunnel now and begun a slow but deliberate descent towards the lower base. They would probably pass me in around 10 minutes, meaning that I just needed to keep holding out. The other monitors showed that my time here was coming to an end though. The lights flickered when that explosion came through, plunging the cell block hallway into total darkness for just a fraction of a second. That was all that the dark matter had needed though. It must have used that brief time to flank around the soldiers at one end of the hallway, and as they were still flinging their lights around desperately, shadows suddenly began to swallow them one by one. It was like, well, it was almost cartoonish. They were just falling right into these massive pits of darkness that would appear on the wall or the floor, like a cartoon gag, but when they got sucked in it looked painful. Like they were entering a black hole and being torn into shreds as it pulled them in. "Hey man, let me in." Somebody began knocking at my door. They sounded terrified, and I can't say I blame them. "Come on, they're coming. Don't let them get me, please." "Hold on, I've got to move the furniture." I shouted back through, starting to move the chairs. "Please, Wash, hurry. They're gonna kill me if they see me." He shouted back through as I was starting to unlock the door. I froze instead, a hand just about to turn the deadbolt and let him through. Slowly, I turned back to the monitors, afraid that I was right about what I was about to see. The only other person on base that I had spoken to and given my name was the commanding officer on upper base and Mills. Neither of them were here tonight. Sure enough, as I faced the monitor, I saw the room that the doppelganger was being held in. Empty. "Wash, let me in," the voice shouted again. Something was off about it, like it was more than one voice saying the same thing, but talking out of turn so that they didn't quite harmonize. "Let me in, let me in." All I could do was pile the chairs in front of the door again, desperately hoping that it would go away. I don't know how it knew my name, but when it spoke, my blood ran cold. There was pure malice in its voice, and all I could feel was that it was going to hurt me. I got this distinct feeling that it didn't want to kill me though, only inflict as much pain as it could. My blood ran cold as I made my way back behind my desk, climbing under it and holding hands over my ears as it just kept screaming at me. The voice kept changing, turning into other people as it first begged me to let it in, and then turned more violent, demanding that I open the door for it to get through. Before long, it must have gotten bored though, because it stopped knocking on the door and shouting. I waited a few minutes, afraid if I came out of my hiding spot, it would just be waiting there on the other side of the desk. That huge grin full of teeth, ready to devour me within seconds as soon as it saw me. I took a deep breath, crawling out little by little as the monitors above me blared with chaos. Everything on upper base was a disaster. Fire all over the place. Even if I could get through the tunnel and get back there, making it through the flames was going to be a whole other challenge. God, I didn't even know if my car was crushed out there considering all the carnage. A walk through the desert in the middle of the night was almost as dangerous as the aliens attacking from every direction. The lights flickered again as another explosion rocked the base. Looking at the monitors, I could see the grays approaching my section of the tunnel. All I could do was keep quiet, hoping that they didn't try to look in here as they continued along their warpath. Too much to ask, especially for my luck. The first gray that was leading the pack stopped in front of my door. It raised a hand and I heard the metal begin to bend and creak. Diving back onto the desk, I pulled myself in as much as I could, desperate to avoid being seen as it ripped the door from the hinges without even touching it. Pretty sure that I involuntarily squealed a little when the door hit the wall, falling to the floor with an even louder bang as the gray stepped into the room. I saw its feet as it walked around for a moment, inspecting its surroundings for whatever it was looking for. It stopped in front of the monitor, staying there for the longest minute of my life, as it studied them before walking back out, leading the rest of the grays forward. At that point, I could only assume they were after the one that was laying in the cell down the hall. And guess aliens have the same code of no man left behind that we do. Who says that we have nothing in common, right? Too bad they were slaughtering us to make sure that it happened. I have to get out of here. There are no excuses now. I was exposed to the dangers outside without a door on the hinges. I had to move fast. Looking at the monitors, the grays were far enough ahead in the tunnel that I could slip out without them noticing. I poked my head out, making sure there were no stragglers that could fold me like origami with their mind, and I started my escape. Running as fast as I could towards upper base, I was quickly out of breath. The incline in here was killer, and God knows it's at least a couple of miles directly up. But nevertheless, I've got to keep trying. I managed to get maybe halfway there before I came across a body. It was slumped next to a wall, head down and blood all over the front of its uniform. As I got closer, trying to give it a wide berth, it began to cough. I paused, unsure of what my next move should be. If it's another soldier, the obvious answer is that I should help, right? But then there was the other chance nagging at the back of my mind. I've had this pit in my stomach since the run-in with the doppelganger. This guy could just be that thing trying to lure and prey. If it is, well, then trying to help him is a death sentence. Help. A weak voice came through the coughing. Ah, heck, I can't leave them in good conscience to die on the slight chance that they could be that monster. I know it goes against self-preservation, but I can't leave him here. Hey man, what got you? I said, moving toward him slowly. His head tilted a little, looking for where my voice was coming from. As he looked up, I could see that although he was pretty messed up, he was definitely human. His throat was slashed pretty bad though, and judging by the amount of blood everywhere, he wasn't making it out of this tunnel. That thing disguised itself as one of us, he gurgled out. The doppelganger then. It had been through here already. Was I going to have to face it when I get to the upper base? Before I could think further, he kept talking. He tore out their throats and his teeth, ate them while they were still screaming. I tried stabbing him, but he slashed me. Oh, I don't think I'm going to make it. It's cold. Hey, stay with me, okay? I'm going to get help and come back here for you, all right? I said. Is that death? He asked, pointing towards the tunnel going to the lower base. I looked forward, squinting as the light seemed to dim. It was definitely getting darker. Uh-oh, was all that I could get out before a long shadow appeared in the middle of the room, steadily getting closer as it made its way out. God knows what this thing can do once it hits outside, but I wasn't about to stay around here and figure it out. I grabbed the soldier, hoisting him over my shoulder and starting to move as fast as we could. This guy was dead weight, almost cold to the touch too, not able to contribute at all to escaping certain death. We got a few feet before I tripped over one of his legs while trying to haul his limp body, dropping him as I fell to the ground. The shadow caught up, taking hold of one of his feet first and then slowly drawing the rest of him in. Whatever blood that he had left in there slowly seeping out as it crumpled his body into shadow. Look, it might seem like I got over it quick, but I promise once the dark had him, there was no saving him. Instead, I ran my butt off, heading towards upper base as fast as I could in the hopes that I could outrun the primordial dark that was still devouring a man behind me. After a minute, I could tell that I was getting close. Smoke began to fill the tunnel, causing me to nearly choke as I ran, gasping for breath desperately. Emerging from the tunnel almost made me want to go back in and chance it with the darkness. The discs filled the sky above and everything was on fire. I had to move carefully, afraid that they were going to vaporize me in seconds if they caught sight of me. My best bet was to go around the main building and find my way to the parking lot. If my car wasn't totaled, then I could maybe wait out the discs until they leave, and then get the heck out of Dodge. It was a pretty far-fetched plan, but it was all that I had at the time. Slowly, sticking to whatever shadows that I could with the fear that they might devour me any second, I made my way from the tunnel entrance to the R&D building. Logically, the parking lot was on the other side of it, so I could just go straight through the building and out the other side, minimizing my risk of being seen by the discs or the Greys as they made the return trip. Inside of R&D, it was rough. There were various aircraft in differing stages of construction, with pieces and parts all over the place. Different testing arrays lit up on one side of the massive hangar, while down at the far end there was something making a continuous beeping noise. Further on to my left, I could see one of the discs, the one that we had in our inventory from the old crash. The big laser cutter was still sitting nearby, lights blinking on a control panel to show that it had been abandoned mid-use. A loud crash made me jump. Just up ahead in shadows between the fluorescent bulbs was a soldier. He had pushed something over, seemingly on the hunt for something in the huge hangar. I tried to hide from it, trying to quietly duck towards one of the walls and out of the fluorescent lights where it could see me. Unfortunately for me, this place was a mess, and I tripped over a rolling toolbox that was in the path, causing it to crash to the ground. Not sure what I expected to happen, but the creature let out a roar when it heard the noise, now aware that it wasn't alone in here. The roar was quickly stifled though, instead being replaced by a discordant voice that phased in and out of normal range, moving from male to female, adult to child as it tried to modulate. As it turned, I kept going to try and hide, even though it felt futile. "Come here," it shouted, moving towards where I was ducked down behind a workbench. "You son of a, get over here." As it got closer, I could feel the sense of dread in my stomach growing. I couldn't make out the face covered in shadows, but where its eyes were seemed to be shining, reflecting little bits of light like a predator's will in the dark, looking for its next meal. I don't know if it could see in the dark, but I could swear that it was honing in on me with ease. "Wash, it's you!" The doppelganger shouted now. Must have seen me. I had to make a run for it. Hell with giving my position away. If I was faster, I could make it to the far door and get out of here before it had a chance to catch up. "Come here!" It moved faster. Faster than I had ever seen any human move in my life, seemingly going down on all fours to run at me faster. As it closed in, I fell back, crashing to the ground beside the disc as it gained ground on me. Looking around, I grabbed my gun from its holster, leveling it at the doppelganger and firing. My aim was good, and the bullet hit it right in the face, making its head blast back for a moment. "Now why would you do that?" it said again. The voice was more discordant this time, hundreds of different inflections and tones all fighting for supremacy under the tide of noise. The prevailing feeling that I got from it now wasn't just malice, it was anger. I had pissed it off and now it really wanted to hurt me, even more so than before. I scrambled, firing off more shots into the monster. They each hit but did nothing when it came to slowing it down. The bullets were useless, and as I looked around, my only options were crowbars, various mechanic tools, and the laser. I have no idea how to use this thing, so I just had to hope that when it was left here, they had already primed it so it was ready to go. The doppelganger lurched frontward, screaming at me in an ancient language that I couldn't understand. I turned the dial on the console all the way towards the top to max it out, and hit the green button that was lit up next to it. The light that came out of that thing was practically blinding. I closed my eyes, turning my head as it flashed. I could hear that creature screaming even louder now, and smelled something burning as the laser hit it. After a moment, the light died down and I finally opened my eyes. The doppelganger lay on the ground, half its face melted and the entire torso on fire. It was twitching on the ground, still cursing me in that ancient language, but unable to keep moving. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to wait to see what happened to it. I ran, heading towards the back door and bursting through it. On the other side of the road, there was the parking lot. My car was parked in the back corner, and from the looks of it, it was still intact. I kept to the back wall, desperate to avoid being seen, and continued slowly moving across the road towards my car. After a moment, I finally made it, pulling out keys and unlocking the door manually so that the lights didn't alert anything to my presence. Before I could get in, I looked across at the burning base and tunnel entrance to see the grays emerge. The one that had been prisoner was floating alongside the others, levitating out of the tunnel with whatever powers they had used to tear dozens of soldiers apart. As they emerged, the discs began to shine their lights down, beaming them up into the ships one by one. Just to be safe, I ducked down in my seat and waited to see if they would leave. After the last gray was picked up, the discs fired off a few more lasers before rising into the sky, suddenly blinking out and disappearing completely. As they left, a laser suddenly hit the R&D building, causing it to explode and hit me with a blast of heat. That was the last thing that I needed to tell me that this wasn't the place to be. Turning the key, I threw it into drive and hit the gas, nearly smashing into another car when it had lurched forward. I steered around it, hitting the road and flooring the pedal towards the entrance. The guard arm was down, but I smashed straight through it, unwilling to wait for it to raise. Not like there was still guards at the gate to raise it anymore. The flames were in my rear view for almost 20 minutes, burning into the night sky as I drove as far away as I could. I came home surprised that a cop didn't pull me over for speeding. At some point, a bunch of fire trucks passed me, heading towards the base to deal with the chaos that I had left behind. About 6 hours ago, I walked into the door of my apartment and I haven't looked back. Typing this up just seems silly now, considering all that I've gone through in the past 12 hours. I've been looking out my window every 5 minutes, waiting to see black vans roll up ready to cart me off to some black site where I'll never be heard from again. I don't think I'll be lucky enough to have some aliens come break me out if they do take me, but dang it, they are real. They're out there and we're not alone. If this country is smart, they won't try picking any more fights with them.